I'm here to stand on my soapbox and proclaim that to the world.
On this show.
This is the hottest show on the planet right now.
What's the debate?
Ain't no debate.
All right. What's going on, YouTube family? You are tuning into the Vulcan Soapbox, where we harness the power of logic and teach you how to reason at the highest level. I am Enos with my partners. Can I go ahead and introduce yourself? What's going on? Freshly Snipes.
Fresh Snipes. Y'all know what it is. I'm just here to get my shots up. Appreciate y'all for coming out, joining us, checking out the show. Like, comment, subscribe. Let's get to it.
Let's go. And then my guy Vulcan, what's going on, man?
What's going on? All the people out there, all my folks, people who appreciate critical thinking and reasoning and don't want to be beguiled by all the sophistry we see out there in today's internet and all of everything we're seeing right now. So let's dive right into the topic, y'all. I appreciate it. Soapbox. Let's get it.
Shout out to Help the Bear, says soapbox. Yeah,
Man, say how he meant it, man. Soapbox. The crowd goes wild.
Yes, sir. Shout out to Help the Bear. Fortunate news today. The Pope, we found out the news this morning that he passed away at 88 this morning. I want to get right into the topic we're going to discuss today. Pope Francis, 88, born in 1936 and died in 2025. Died earlier today. I'm going to cover some comments. When did y'all find out about this before I bring the comments up? Fresh and Vulcan.
So you said, what was the question?
Yeah, when did y'all find out about the Pope dying this morning?
I think sometime around 1 or 2 o'clock this afternoon, I was scrolling. I happened to see it.
I think somebody told me, I don't remember who, but somebody mentioned it. I think they may have been Catholic and they told me. Wow, look at that time span right there. That man has seen a lot.
Yeah. So
Some would say too much.
Yeah. Here's some of the comments. Fresh, you could do the honors.
Let's see. Pope Francis consistently deviated from God's word. We shall not miss him. That's Hudabari Noni. Man, that's a wild thing to say right after someone died. I'm not saying that people are we'll move right along. Chris Floto, 335.99, 12 hours ago, said, I hope we get a pope that goes back to following the Bible fully. I hope he wants to go away from the one world government.
Wow.
Yeah. Sounded like he may not have had a lot of fans out there.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Catholicism following is almost cult-like, so this is kind of shocking to see out loud in these numbers.
Mm-hmm. What's your thoughts on those comments?
Well, so I guess I'll go first. So my thought on the comment is, Fresh already mentioned that it's kind of a wild thing to say after somebody passes. That's going to boil down to your theology. For people who are more Protestant, such as myself, I did not have any type of reverence for the Pope, other than like a loose reverence I'd have for anybody who is a public minister, a public servant. So, which is a lot. It's better. There's a whole lot of things he can be doing outside of being the Pope. So I give him the minimum amount of reverence I would give to somebody like that. But as far as the comment, definitely don't consider that to be a servant of God's word. And but I don't think they would call themselves that, especially, they believe that in the papacy that, the church is above the word of God, and that they're able to, especially the Pope specifically, has papal infallibility, where they're able to rule of all things in faith and practice, and it can supersede a lay person's interpretation of the scriptures. So I definitely don't hold to that as a Protestant. That would be my comments about that topic.
in layman's terms, he says the Pope can make up stuff, and because he's the Pope, it goes regardless of what the Bible says. Based
Yes.
on based on the claim that I'm the Pope, I know more than you. I've been blessed by God. You don't know nothing.
Yeah. I have had friends that were Catholic, and you really get a good mix. I mean, I've been very fascinated by the Catholic Church, Roman Catholic Church, I should say. So I guess I'll start off by saying Catholic just means universal. So when people think of the Catholic Church, goes all the way back to the beginning, and because you'll see in the historical writings the word Catholic, but Catholic just means universal. So it wasn't like it was Roman Catholic at the time. It was just the church, all the church
Yeah,
people.
everybody.
And so you don't have a pope for many, 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 many years after the church is founded. After Constantine, we're talking about at least 400 to 600 years before you have somebody that's known as a pope. Of course, they would probably say that started off with Peter and worked its way down the line, but there's no real record of that. So I would say that I would delineate from being a Roman Catholic and just be a part of the Catholic Church. But I think that ultimately all that's considered in Christendom. It's debated whether or not Catholics are Christians, Roman Catholics are Christians, depending upon who you ask and what's your particular, how rigid you are in your soteriology. I'm pretty rigid on my soteriology, so I generally wouldn't count.
You want to give us a definition of soteriology for the people?
So soteriology is the Greek word soterion. It just means salvation. So it's like whatever your view on salvation. So one of the main distinctions between Protestantism and Roman Catholicism is Protestantism is the belief that it's salvation comes from faith, not by works. And Roman Catholicism, there's other things added to it, like baptism for one, the sacraments. Those are things that are added to salvation.
That you
Where
can earn salvation through things that you do, i.e. the however many Hail Marys, so forth and so on.
Yeah, so those are different distinctions. That's where this comment is really coming from, deviated from God's word. And I wouldn't even say the word deviated. They never were really rooted in God's word. That's an aside to the Roman Catholic Church, because again, they believe that they can create doctrine on the spot on their own through the doctrine of papal infallibility. And when the Pope speaks, that becomes the doctrine of the church, where Protestants believe that the Bible is the final authority on doctrine, and we have authority in so far as we interpret it correctly. So anybody from the lay person to the person in the pulpit can be corrected based off of exegesis of the text. So that's a major difference right there. But Martin Luther, who's the beginning, who led the beginning of the Protestant Reformation, that was one of the things that he discussed. But a lot of different doctrines are different between Roman Catholics and Christians, but the primary one being dealing with salvation and just salvation by faith alone. That's a major distinction between Roman Catholics and Christians, and because of that doctrine, many Protestants would say that Roman Catholics aren't even really saved or Christian because of that foundational issue. A lot of different denominations, people bring up a lot of different denominations of the church, which is true. But there's like you have like salvation issues, salvific issues. Then you have non-salvation issues. It's typically how people are separate the types of doctrines and how important they are. And if you're dealing with the nature of God, or you're dealing with the nature of salvation and things of that nature, if you start playing with that too much, then you could find yourself being considered a cult or outside of what Orthodox Christians would consider to be traditional doctrine or correct doctrine. Orthodoxy.
Bring help the bear say he is their spiritual father. Yeah, that's what Pope means. Am I correct? I think the Pope means spiritual father or father. I think
Are
that's
you
what
asking us, or are you?
Yeah, I'm asking one of y'all. Do y'all know the definition or the translation of what a Pope means? I thought it was spiritual father. But yeah.
When was the first Pope?
Um,
Enos?
I wouldn't know.
Okay. You asking us random questions. I was going to ask you random questions too.
The origin of Pope, the Greek origin is like the origin of father, or is the Greek word like papas. Pappas, is the origin of where the name the Pope comes from. So I don't even know if it means spiritual father, but I think it translates loosely to father.
Father, yeah. All right. Yeah, so one more comment. Yeah, that was some news that I got this morning. I know that the world was saddened by his passing, especially for those that's underneath the Catholicism. You know, that's really
Yeah.
big. That was really big.
It also
Mhm.
set people, like regular people, up as saints or people who are holier than thou, because of their positions or roles in the history of Christianity or Catholicism, like Mary or Saint such and such, which is not bad per se, but it is when you're talking about worshiping an individual the same way that you worship, or with the same reverence that you would worship the deity that we chose to worship. So
Right.
could even get into spaces of blaspheme.
Let me get some more comments. Get y'all thoughts on this.
Brandon Halsey 2947 says, all of you Catholics insulting the deceased Holy Father need to take a look at the plank in your own eye. Why wish evil or insult a deceased man? Where's the love, mercy, etc.? The hate you harbor in your hearts was the thing he sought to fight against. I don't agree with him in terms of his overall indictment of the faith, but I do take issue with kind of the anger that folks are addressing a man who just passed away with, as if he didn't die earlier this morning. I mean, it's okay to voice your displeasure with the man, especially while he's kind of allowed to defend himself. But what good is it at this point? What is it helping? Where's the move? I don't understand it. The internet has really emboldened a new class of people in my opinion. And that obviously doesn't just hold to this particular uh, subject. It's just people get on the internet and say whatever they want to say because there's no real
Well,
consequences associated
I,
with.
I would just hope that when he says that, why wish evil or insult the deceased man, I'm hoping that it actually is people that are wishing evil or insulting him that he's referring to. Because if somebody just critiques some of the things he did openly in front of everybody while he was living, then I would take exception to that, because that just shows the person's writing this comment just can't handle their,
Criticism.
their person that they admire and respect being criticized. But if anybody does something out in the open, the Bible says that Paul rebuked Peter before them all in the book of
Hmm.
Galatians. So if he can rebuke people in front of everybody else, other people can do it as well. So I would just hope that he really does mean wishing evil or insulting the deceased, because I would definitely agree with Freshly on that, that's in poor taste.
Yeah, it's definitely an emotional response, in my opinion. My whole thing is more the timing. I don't care what you say about well, I do care what you say about the man, but these type of comments are not as offensive, or not as problematic if he's alive, right? But once he's dead, I don't even, I would prefer you just don't say anything at all. Now that's a personal opinion for me, and I think it carries to everything. Like, once the man is dead, why are we talking negatively about him? Uh, period. So that may also be an emotional
But I guess I'm wondering what kind of
critique.
negativity they're talking about. They're saying that he was ugly, or that he
Well,
couldn't read good,
no, no,
or
no, no. I'm not talking about the comments that we read, but there are hateful comments, uh, full of vitriol, full of comments full of vitriol on the
Mhm.
internet that I was able to read while reading through comments and stuff about that. So there are people who harbor hate, not the ones that we pulled, which is kudos on Enos for pulling up the ones that we can actually kind of chat about. But I think the comment um, that is criticizing people out there for their hate and vitriol, I don't think it I think it has a place because there are actually people who are out there commenting negative and hateful things about the recently passed Pope.
Mhm.
So I think it has a place. Just it don't fit with what we've presented so far.
For sure.
All right. Yep.
What else we got,
Let's get into Easter.
While he's pulling some of that stuff up, I also want to I want to put out there that I think it's really weird. Not weird. I think it's misplaced anger when you take your criticism of fallible individuals and people and assign it to a whole religion or belief system or even the deity, as if all people are not fallible, as if all
Well,
people are not imperfect.
Well, I will say this. I mean, I do agree with you in general, but I think with the Roman Catholic, because of their doctrine of papal infallibility,
That
you
he is
may
supposed to be held up as
you
perfect.
may be. It's like critiquing Muhammad, I would imagine, or critiquing Jesus. To some extent, because
That's a good point.
at least what he's saying, I don't know if it affects. I don't know. I don't know if the doctrine affects how he perceives what he does specifically. Like if he doesn't wash his hands going out of the bathroom or something like that. I don't know if we can critique that, but I think when he speaks on things on faith and doctrine, I think if he makes a mistake or he errs, I think that might be worth. I think you legitimately can critique the Roman Catholic Church based off their doctrine, just like
No, I agree with
critiquing.
that. I was referring more to people criticizing Christians, like basically you criticize the entire belief system for one person who gets on the internet and says something hateful. Like, where's
Yeah,
y'all's? Like, where's y'all's? Where's all this? I'm like, that person doesn't have. He's not. He's not. He's not showing these traits that we espouse. Excuse me, I'm having a huge brain fart. But he doesn't represent all of us, right? In his fallibility or her
hmm
fallibility. So when people just like, well, if I see one person who claims to be Christian doing something wrong, apparently there's something wrong with Christianity or Buddhism or Catholic, like whatever it is that you want to associate it with. It seems like people forget that people are people when it comes to religion.
and that boils down to that fallacy you brought up before that we all appreciated, was the hypocrisy fallacy.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that hypocrisy fallacy, because somebody wants to disqualify what somebody is saying or the truth of something based off somebody living inconsistent with its disseminated message, that's a fallacious way of reasoning. All of us that listen to our parents say don't steal, and yet maybe our parents left work to come check on the kids at home one day without
Right.
telling their boss. That doesn't mean that stealing's okay because our parents, stole some time off the clock.
Yeah.
Which I'm not saying is right, by the way, folks out there. But that doesn't mean that we should steal because our parents, maybe stealing some time off the clock at work.
Mm. Okay.
Help the bear. I agree with that, Fresh, but it's close to idolatry when it comes to the Pope. That's a good point. Help the bear. Vulcan also made that point. And yeah, I actually agree with that particular point when we're talking about the Pope. The way that the Catholic Church has set him up in that position, it is tantamount to blasphemy when you criticize things that he says.
Yeah. I would just make a minor correction there, or at least point it out that when we say something's close to idolatry, are we saying it's not idolatry, but it's close to it? Because if it's close to idolatry but not idolatry, then technically it's not idolatry. So there's really no infraction there. So just want to say that for the people out there listening. Anytime you see somebody say something like I'm talking too fast. Anytime you see somebody say that's almost like this or that's kind of like this, a lot of times we go on the attack and go, how is it like that? We don't realize what we should be asking. So hold on, you're saying it's kind of
How
like
is it
that or it's
that?
close to that, and
Yeah.
you're saying it's not that. So that means there really is no debate yet. There's no argument.
You got to remember your rounds,
So
Fresh. Sound like
it's
booked
showtime.
in a long
I
time.
slide up. Okay, hold on. Let me get it together now. Well,
Right.
if I guess so. That's a good point, Vulcan. my question after that would be, and you're a lot better, you're a lot more versed in Catholicism. Do they worship the Pope as a deity or as a god? Or because if that's the case, it would be, or if that's the case, it would be idolatry.
Well, I would say in doctrine, no, that's not written anywhere. Now, do individual practitioners worship him as God? I would
Right.
assume so. That's a big debate with the veneration of Mary. They would call it veneration. Some people call it worship of Mary, because they would
Okay.
look at Mary as a intermediate between them and God, which is what the Bible says Jesus is. But with the Pope, there are some who would consider the Pope or the Father inside of their cathedral as an intermediary as well. That can get to be idolatry. I mean, obviously, it depends on what the person's idea of what they're doing is.
Yeah.
When they articulate it, but
Yeah.
in doctrine, no, they don't worship the Pope in doctrine. But the fact that you would put somebody in the seat to be able to speak all, on things that infallibly, on things on doctrine and practice and faith,
Right.
I would consider that a form of worship personally. I think that fits the bill, because you're putting it above the scriptures, which I would consider. We don't worship the scriptures, but
We worship who
we
inspired
worship
the
God,
scripture.
yes. And you're saying that this person's words can supersede God's words.
Yeah.
To me, I would consider that an act of worship.
And I'm not going to spend too much more time on this. If that's the case, how come popes, as many as there have been, have not been able or have not deigned to create new text, add to the text, if they hold the position that they hold with the positional power that they wield in that space?
I think in some ways they kind of have. I mean, these popes have message that disseminate. I forgot the term that they call it, and these things are written down and passed around.
Yeah, but I'm talking
And
about adding to the Bible, right? To the 66, because it's essentially popes
they
are
have
saying
more
that.
than 66 in their book, but they don't consider them all inspired texts. But they do have technically more. They have the apocrypha, the pseudo apocrypha, and their ancient texts, their scriptures.
And these are considered, when you say
Uh,
ancient texts, that's kind of my question. When
yeah,
you're
so
talking
their
about
Bible's a
ancient
little
texts,
bigger than the Protestant Bibles.
but it's still ancient, right?
Yes,
There's nothing added as in the 2000s.
yeah, nothing added.
So to my point is, if they are worshipped as deities, and they have such authority in that position, why are there? I guess why are there no new text?
Well, I guess it would depend on how we want it to look. Are we expecting them to just have some more sheets in their Bible and have him fill it out or type it out? Because they have other documents that
Right.
are his sayings and his beliefs and his new stances on things, and that's disseminated out as the official stance of the church. To me, that's as close as you. I mean, that would be considered in addition to
Biblical.
the Bible. They're just not putting it in there with the Bible, because it's almost like the Mormons. The Mormons have the Pearl of Great
Okay.
Price. They have the Mormon book. They have the Bible. They don't add it to the Bible. They just have another book that they consider to be inspired by God as well.
Okay. Almost like a
Yeah, technically, that's
like
what
a reference, almost like a reference.
yeah, that's what
If
the
it's not in here, then you can go look over here.
yeah, and it's just as good, because it supersedes whatever your interpretation was of the Bible.
Okay.
Just like
Appreciate
the
that.
Muslims, the Muslims have the same thing. They have the Quran, but in the Quran it says that you are to follow the teachings of the Injil, which is the Gospels.
Mm-hmm.
So it says in the Torah. So it says that that's God's word too. So the Quran is a part of it as well. So they don't add it to the Bible, but they reference the Bible as being accurate.
Reference text.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they're saying it's all God's word at the end of the day.
Appreciate you. See, even I can learn some stuff.
Untitled Bear says a news channel said that he was somewhat liberal.
Somewhat.
Yeah, some they were concerned that he was concerned he was conformed to the world today. Who watches the news clips though? Yeah, that was a lot of the positions he took was more geared towards the liberal, and that makes sense to. I mean, it depends on his intentions or his agenda. That would make sense if you want to be popular amongst the majority or people in the world. So yeah, I did see
Do we think it depends on his intentions, or is it more based on his actions, the things he actually did?
Well, when I say intentions, where if he is gearing towards more, or his actions is more liberal, then I say yeah, it would make sense for his. You get what I'm trying to say? As far as if his intentions was to gain popularity in the world, it'll make sense he will go the liberal route. That's what I'm saying. Yeah. So
Okay.
that's what I said. That would make sense if that was the case. But
Yeah, I think a lot of his quote unquote policies did align with secular views, which is why he, indicative of why he received such vitriol.
And you got to think this guy was born in like the 1930s, so you got to think he comes from a world that was much more conservative than the world we live in today.
Yeah, because a lot of those, not just Catholicism, I think it was Mormons. A lot of them did change their views. Back in the day, most of them were more traditionally conservative, and it seemed like some of them did adopt new ideologies and did conform more to more liberal thinking. So that happens with certain religions. All right, so let me get y'all thoughts. Easter just happened this past Sunday. Let me know what y'all think
So
about
Easter,
this.
Easter just happened, everybody out there. So all you who celebrated Easter with your families, we wanna congratulate you on spending time with the fam. Some of you who didn't get to do it, definitely I understand, people get busy with work and other things going on. But we had a great time celebrating Easter on our end. And one of the things about Easter that comes up every single year, along with a lot of holidays, is the paganism videos proliferate, and people say that those of you who are celebrating, there's people who are Christians and non-Christians who point out the fact that of what they believe Easter's origins are, and then they let Christians know that you're out of the know if you're celebrating these pagan holidays. And so this video right here is somewhat of a encapsulation of the things that you'll hear out there. So I wanted to have it addressed. And you'll see us doing this pretty much every holiday that pops up where the paganism comes up again, because it's a reoccurring theme. And this show is about critical thinking and logic. And so I think it's just really important for us to always hit the nail on the head with these topics here, because so many folks are deceived by this kind of thinking. So many folks hear these kind of things and it shakes their faith, or they go out and shake other people's faith by it, and they think they have this strong conviction because they feel like they have history on their side, and they have the strong conviction to go out there and make changes. And a lot of this stuff can be cleared up with a little bit of understanding about not just the history, which is always important information, but how to think critically, how to be logical, how to be reasonable. And that's what this show's about. And so we're going to cover this video here and go into a little bit of how to view this topic from a very reasonable way. Sorry, go ahead, Enos.
All right, before I go into the video, Help the Bear said, dang, he was around during the Spanish Inquisition in 1930s. She's laughing out loud. Yeah. Old guy, man. Yeah. He's been here for a long time, seen a lot of things, man. Seen a lot of things. Let me go ahead and start the video for you now. Right.
Silly rabbit, Easter is for Jesus. Or is it? Welcome to History in a Minute. Today, Easter celebrates the resurrection of Christ. So why do we have bunnies and decorated eggs? The answer lies in pagan celebrations of spring that mark the return of life after winter. One such festival honored Easter, a pagan goddess of spring and fertility, whose symbols were likely the hare and the egg. These represented new life and rebirth, fitting for the season's renewal. As Christianity spread between the 5th and 8th centuries, the Catholic Church often absorbed local customs to make conversion easier. By blending familiar traditions with new beliefs, the Church helped pagans feel at home in the faith. In Anglo-Saxon England, the month of Austermna, named after the goddess, coincided with the Christian celebration of resurrection. While most of the Christian world continued calling the holiday Pacha, or Passover, English Christians began using the name Easter, drawn from the old pagan festival. Over time, the names and symbols blended, giving us our modern interpretation of Easter. Silly rabbit, Easter is for Jesus. Or is it? Welcome to History in a Minute. Today, Easter celebrates the resurrection of Christ.
All right. What's your thoughts on that video?
So,
go ahead, Bob.
well, I was gonna say that video is a very common theme that you'll see all across the internet from a lot of different people, like I mentioned before. So, first, you wanted to hit it first, or?
I was actually going to say I think it encapsulates really well what the reigning theory on Easter. If you have something against Christianity, how people who are against it feel about the paganism of it all. But it also made some really good points. I think that really kind of work. I would say in the favor of it, but it made some good points that over time they just blended. It made the stuff that was added to make conversion easier, which is a common theme amongst mass conversion. From corporate takeovers to to a new coach coming onto a team, like those types of things happen. Keep some of the old to make it easier.
I think that's like Law 45 or one of the laws in the 40s and the 40 laws of power. If you want to introduce something new to somebody, you got to make it look like something old.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a very well known and very heavily utilized mechanism in helping people to change over to a new way. You can't make it look too new. But right. I think the bigger point that I wanted to hit on was just when it comes to things like this, whatever the historical context people are given to something, especially when it comes to this is pagan or where this come from, you got to understand the process of how do you do history and the fundamentals. You don't have to become a historian. One thing you got to understand is primary source material. If Freshly writes a book about an event that's happening around him in, say, 1910, right? And then people subsequently write books about his books and about his experiences by interviewing him and then reading his material and writing about his material in the 1930s, 1970s, all up to 2025. The primary source material is what he wrote about the event that happened that he wrote about. So what people will do in these type of situations, they're reading other people's literature about the topic, and they're going, this must be true because they wrote it. But you got to look at the historical core of what's going on there. What happened at the person who wrote about it is Ishtar, is whatever they're talking about, the reason why it's being done today. Just because you look it up and you go, oh, wow, that word is like that word, Easter and Easter over here, Ishtar and Easter, doesn't mean that's how it got to us today. It'd be like saying, I heard somebody give this example. I thought it was a really good example. Thursday, we call it Thursday, right? That's the Norse god Thor, which we all know now because Marvel has gotten so big within the last, 10 or 15 years. But so if you do something on a Thursday, are you celebrating the Norse god Thor? Well, if you look up right now, Freshly and Vulcan and Enos did a show on a Thursday. We used to do our show on Thursdays, and so we're doing a show on Thursday, and then there was, and a lot of electrical stuff was going on that day, and so you see that's a thunder god Thor. So you shouldn't celebrate their podcast because of Thor. You would look at that and go, that's ridiculous. Well, in the same way, just because names are similar, because there's some historical correlation there to some extent, doesn't mean that the modern day practice of a certain event is linked to its ancestral past.
Right.
So you got to make that logical connection and jump there. Yeah. So one, a lot of the historical things people are saying about Easter are not true when you look up, or it's very unclear.
It's inaccurate,
because we don't have a lot of documentation. So it's either unclear or it's untrue. You look at this historical thing. So do a little bit more digging when you come. People talk about the history of Easter and where it comes from. That's on the historical knowledge side. I'm going to bring up a logical point, but anybody want to speak on that part before I go to the logical point of it?
Well, I was just going to add to that you also have to consider that a lot of the ways that some of these traditions are passed down is orally by people who may or may not have the ability to read or write. So you're always going to lose some sort of contextual detail in those spaces because it is open to interpretation. It doesn't mean that the origin or the original context isn't as important or isn't potent. But again, these things are being passed down through multiple different multiple different ways of communication: oral, writing, dance, song.
If I can,
Uh,
if I can say
Go
it
ahead.
this way real quick, because I forgot to say this common phrase, which is correlation doesn't equal causation. Just because you
Perfect.
see correlation between doesn't equal causation. Like,
Yeah.
I heard this. There was a debate between Dr. James White and Dan Barker, and Dan Barker made the point that Mary in the Bible, Jesus' mother was named Mary because it was borrowed from a religion where Miriam, and he shows a different connection, the names between other ancient stories and stuff like that, right? And he was like, look, so Mary comes from Mary because they were borrowing from this story, this pagan story from the past. But then they did like a census on names in that time period when Jesus was alive, and the most common name for a woman to be was Mary. So was Mary named Mary because it was borrowed from a different religion to make Christianity look, to borrow so Christianity could borrow from this other religion? Or was Mary her name because that was the most common name at that time period?
Mhm.
Well, if you look at explanatory power and explanatory scope, it's more reasonable to assume that her name was Mary because that was the most common name at the time. Not because it was borrowed from other religion. That takes a lot more assumptions to believe that.
Mhm.
You got to believe that these people were aware of that religion. That religion was a religion they wanted to borrow from. Then you got to look at, is there any documentation that Christians or Jews were borrowing from that religion at the time? There's no historical information. Or if you do a census and it goes, that was the most common name, that's Occam's razor. The simplest explanation is normally the best
It's normally
explanation.
the best section. Yep.
Yeah, and so it's like, oh, that's just a common name that to be had at that time. And so in
Yeah.
the same way, when you go with this right here, just because you have Easter being called this at a certain time period, doesn't mean that was causing what we do today, as we call Easter or Resurrection Sunday, depending on what you say.
It
So
was
I
just
want to add the
contextually
critical,
relevant.
absolutely right. I just want to add the critical thinking element to it. And the last thing I want to say about this, which I think is the most important part for all of these conversations, whether it's Christmas or Thanksgiving or Easter, all of these holidays that are considered pagan, is something called the genetic fallacy. So if you could put that up on the screen at some point in time. But the genetic fallacy is a very common fallacy you see whenever we're talking about holidays and where the origins of things, whether we're talking about the origins of a certain music or certain sports or whatever the case may be. So you bring up, well, this has pagan origins. These origins are not, free and clear and completely godly or
So
pure.
I reject it.
Yeah, so I reject it. And so because this thing is called the same thing that something else was called 100 years ago, 50 years ago, 1,000 years ago, I'm gonna reject it because I see that correlation in its naming. So I'm assuming that's a causation there. And a lot of times that stuff's erroneous.
Yep.
It's a fallacious way of reasoning. So if we look at it right here, it says genetic fallacy. And again, y'all, this is a show about critical thinking and logic. So more important than information and knowledge is knowing how to connect the dots of the information you have in a reasonable way.
Mm-hmm.
And so genetic fallacy, sorry, somebody can read it or I'm gonna read it.
Genetic fallacy, also known as the fallacy of origins or the fallacy of virtue, basing the truth claim of an argument on the origin or its claims or premises. The logical form: the origin of the claim is presented, therefore the claim is true and or false. Example one: Lisa was brainwashed as a child into thinking that people are generally good, therefore people are not generally good. The explanation of that is the fact that Lisa may have been brainwashed as a child is irrelevant to the claim that people are generally good. Another example: he was born to Catholic parents and raised as a Catholic until his confirmation in the 8th grade. Therefore, he is bound to want to defend some Catholic traditions and therefore cannot be taken seriously. Uh, the
Yeah.
author is referring to himself here. His upbringing was Catholic, and he's long since considered himself a Catholic. It's irrelevant to any defenses that he makes in defense of Catholicism, like the fact that many local churches do focus on helping the community through charity work, etc. If he makes an argument defending anything Catholic, the argument should be evaluated on the argument itself and not the history of the one making the argument or how it came to hold the claims as true or false. So basically, don't believe or disbelieve something based on who or where it originally came from, because that doesn't actually have any bearing on whether it's true
Yeah,
or not. To put it in the layman's terms, right?
absolutely right.
I don't date Darrens because the last Darren that I dated hurt me. So now I just don't date Darrens in general. Well,
Yeah.
that sounds stupid.
Yeah, the next Darren is not have, you know, I'll say the prior Darren has no causal relationship to the next Darren. Just because there's a correlation in name doesn't mean that there's any causal effect that that Darren is in some way connected to the Darren you have, and so you're going to see the same thing happen again.
Yeah.
What you see that most common
all
happening.
Keishas are bad.
Yeah, you see that happen a lot with the astrology stuff, but that's a whole other story.
A whole nother story.
I don't.
We don't got that type of time.
Yeah, we don't have that kind of time. But yeah, so y'all, for all y'all folks out there, understand this, that you know, whether Easter in its origin was pagan or not, which can be heavily disputed historically, but I don't want to get too much into that right now, because the show's about critical thinking, not knowledge and information based, because we all have Google and we have Chat GPT now. You can look up the history and get to this primary source material on, you know, what Easter came from. That's not going to help you when it comes to you extrapolating from one premise to your conclusion. That's going to take you learning critical thinking skills and understanding fallacies. What's fallacious reasoning? What's a sophistry versus what's valid reasoning? And that's what's most important here, because if you're great at reasoning, you don't need a lot of information. Anybody seen the show Sherlock Holmes?
Which
Holmes.
one?
Yeah.
The Benedict Cumberbatch show?
I'll talk about Robert Downey Jr.
Oh, the RDJ? Yeah.
Yeah. I'm a fan of all, you know,
the movies, because you said show. That's why I asked.
Yeah. So yeah, good point. The one the Henry Cavill ones he had going on.
Those are also pretty solid.
Yeah. I didn't really watch
Enola Holmes.
Great, but yes. And my point is saying that they were able. One of the things that made them so special compared to his contemporaries was that he's able to extrapolate the most minute of details about a situation, because his ability to reason through things and understand if this then that better than most other people. And
also, it seems like to me, especially with what Fresh and Vulcan, both of y'all were saying that some of these religious beliefs were ancient, so most of it was passed down through oral tradition. So it seemed like it would be difficult to find the primary source for a lot of these religions, because a lot of these religions passed down orally, you know. And my question is, how do you know?
Work on the question. Oh, sorry. You got the question ready?
Yeah. I'm just saying, would you agree that a lot of these traditions, especially on the Eastern religions, that's going to be difficult to really find a lot of these primary sources for these religions?
That's why that's where logic and reasoning come in.
Ding. But again, I'm saying primary source material as far as somebody saying the origin, so that wouldn't even be the religion itself. So somebody's saying that Christmas or Thanksgiving or Easter comes from pagan origins, they're studying those more disorganized religions, as I would call them, the more spiritualism, Norse mythology, Greek mythology, stuff like that. You know, which, as to your point, would be more difficult to find a primary source material, because one, a lot of these religions weren't rooted in history. A lot of us have a very Judeo-Christian lens or Abrahamic lens, because the Quran, the Bible, was rooted in history. So that's, you know, archaeologists use those documents to discover things. When you look at like Zeus and Apollos, that stuff wasn't rooted in history. This doesn't say in 1935 Zeus did this. You know, you're not going to see that stuff in that literature, because when they wrote that stuff, it wasn't meant to be historical documents. So yes, it would be difficult to find a primary source material, because there's no dates. You know, there's no dates for those kind of things. And so yes, Norse mythology being the same way, there's no dates. So yes, it would be difficult to get to that stuff, because it wasn't meant to be an historical account like you'll see in the Quran or Judaism or the Bible or the Christianity, where those are meant to be historical accounts. They didn't believe they were writing myth. They believed they were writing history.
And true. And that's a good point you said. I think for the audience, that's something to remember, that when it comes to Judeo Christian, whether it's Islam and
Abrahamic
Judaism and Christianity, that these are actually historic accounts. These are actually books that people used to get out the library. That's different from that's a good point. That's a good point that should be noted.
I want to add one more wrinkle to it, or kind of caveat off of the example that Vulcan used with the RDJ Sherlock Holmes. The villains in those pictures are often counting on the fact that people in general, the general public, are not as observant or finicky about details
Yes.
as RDJ is. Therefore, they're utilizing that, right? They're kind of weaponizing people's general trustworthiness, or not trustworthiness,
Yes.
general trusting natures.
Or negligence, one of the two.
Or
Yeah.
negligence that's a very good point. Some people
Yeah.
kind of refuse to dig deeper because they just, I'll call it laziness.
Yeah.
But if you look at the villains in those, it's in stark contrast to RDJ's level of observance, detail, level of attention to detail. They are counting on the fact that people are not paying attention
And
to kind
counting
of
to
get
it,
there. Go ahead.
and to your point, Fresh, they're kind of to the extent to where they'll even leave these breadcrumbs for Sherlock Holmes that only he would be able to see.
Right.
So in some sense, it's like in plain sight because he has those observational skills, but the average person would never even notice that detail
Right.
there. But the villain may want to, like Moriarty in the second Sherlock Holmes is like, yeah, I'm gonna give you breadcrumbs, but you're still not gonna. I'm still smarter than you, so you're not gonna be able to figure this out in enough time.
Yeah. And he's even, again, because those breadcrumbs exist and there is an actual truth behind the curtain, so to speak, he's counting on, again, and I want people to be aware of this, because a lot of the folks that everyone listens to, the speakers and everyone, they count on the fact that you, the general public, are not going to do the research. They count on the fact that you are not going to utilize logic, right? So it's a really good encapsulation. Is that the word? Yeah, it is encapsulation of kind of the human dynamic when it comes to logic and reasoning. It's like most of us don't use it.
Let me say this, and to your point also, is like I would even say there's degrees to laziness. Now, some people are so lazy they're not going to look up anything. Some folks are lazy, but they're not. They're diligent enough that they're going to actually look up the historical account, because that's simply telling your phone, hey, where does Istar come from? What does Easter come from? Right. But to understand how to think critically, that's going to take multiple Google searches, looking up different fallacies, looking up what happened, and then looking on the fallacy list to see what does this violate any of the fallacies? What is logic? That's going to take a multitude of Google searches. So that's why I say this show's about critical thinking, because you can look up information. You can ask a simple historical question. When was Abraham Lincoln born? Some people are too lazy to even do that. But the question about Abraham Lincoln, some people even look up when he was born. But to actually learn about extrapolation and learn about the difference between sophistry and valid reasoning and fallacious reasoning versus logical reasoning, that is an entirely different endeavor that would take a lot more to learn, because our brains are inherently averse to thinking critically. We want things simple. We want to get it fast. You see a lot of them just on a more pragmatic topic. You see a lot of comedians, especially a lot of Black comedians, talking about the Chitlin circuit and how a lot of times they don't like doing humor in the South because they believe a lot of Southern people a little bit too slow to get their comedy. It's a little too highbrow for them. Now, I'm not saying whether that's true or not, but that's something that you'll see them lament on a regular basis.
Yeah. And then there's also the section of people that are guilty of the bandwagon fallacy, where even though they do that Google search, they're really just looking for something to confirm what they already believe.
Confirmation bias.
Yep.
Yeah, that's the thing too.
I already want to believe this. I want to be different. I want to be smarter than everybody else. So I'm gonna. Yeah. I think so. I'm gonna find something wrong with Easter. I'm too broke. I'm too broke to get my kids some eggs. So I'm gonna find a reason why it's not right, and make my family not celebrate it anymore.
So now my Google search looks like this: Is Easter pagan?
Yeah.
instead of what are Easter's origin?
Yeah, instead of understanding, like from the Bible's perspective, and I should have gotten this earlier. The Bible talks about in Corinthians, other places, about how that we know that all idols are dumb idols anyway. There was an issue in the Bible with people eating fish that was offered to idols, and so the Bible says there are some with a weak conscience who it says don't eat around them that fish, because they believe that that's false worship, false God worship, because they think this fish was offered to idols. But then it says that we know that all idols are dumb idols anyway. They're not real idols. They're not real gods anyway. So it says that you can eat that fish and give thanks to God and just fine. But it says that if you're around somebody who thinks that this is in some way going to be some type of idolatry, then don't eat around them so you don't offend them. So you got to understand, if somebody's celebrating Easter in a way to honor God, listen to their words. If their words are honoring Christ and the resurrection, all that kind of stuff, then also their practices is showing that their family of thankfulness for the resurrection. And they're going into the history of why we celebrate that stuff. All that stuff is good. That's not how people celebrated paganism in the past. If you look at what people are actually doing and not reading into it, but actually looking at what they're doing and reading it correctly, what they're doing, there's no paganism there a lot of times. Well, you're just calling it pagan because you see a correlation between the names and the terminology used, which is very superficial. But
lazy.
if you look at it's lazy. It's lazy extrapolation, lazy thinking. So that's why I'm calling all of you out there who are listening to this to a higher level of thinking. Go beyond just looking up some historical facts and looking up some terms. That's easy to do. Look up how to think critically. Is the name enough to say it's pagan? Do they have to have the practice there? Are they practicing whatever this particular pagan religion from the past you say that they're actually engaging in?
Exactly.
What does it look like? Does it look the same?
Yeah.
That's the law of identity.
Valentine's Day comes from pagan, where they were having same sex. And all right, well, when I celebrate Valentine's, is that what it looks like, or is it just share a name?
Yeah, exactly. So we got to be intellectually honest, audience out there.
Yep. And intellectually diligent as well.
Yes, for sure.
What we got next on the topic, Enos?
Jump into the next video. 10 hard questions.
We need to ask Enos what he got for beard care. His beard is glistening on this camera.
Yeah, his thing is glistening.
You know what I'm saying?
Let your beard glow.
Sponsors holler at us. I try all beard care.
I got a partner who has a beard oil. He's actually commented on our show a few times. His name's Chris. He has a beard oil that he does. You saw him and Maverick going back and forth in the past.
Oh yeah.
So he actually has a beard product. I'm about to holler at him to see if we can get some sponsorship going on, man. But
you need to holler at him because your beard looking weak compared to Enos. Before y'all get on my top about my beard, I got to keep it short for corporate reasons. All right.
Okay.
I work with the white folks.
All right. So so we got a video coming up right now, and just so everybody knows, we don't just throw videos on. We actually introduce them and tell them why the why. Simon said the why behind what we do. So this video was a video that it's called the 10 hard questions Christians should ask themselves but won't. And this is a guy who's a critic of Christianity, which is nothing wrong with being a critic of anything. We should be critical about whatever we believe and don't believe. And so he's doing so, and he's asked some questions to Christians. And so I wanted to go through these questions one by one and give our take on them, a rejoinder, if you will, to what he's saying. And hopefully it's insightful to all those who are listening. But the primary reason I do this, because he said you won't do this. I took that as a challenge. Christians should ask, be asked these questions and answer the questions, but they won't. And I don't know who he's been around or why he thinks that, Christians are afraid of these questions. They're very sophomoric questions. I've heard a lot more intellectually rigorous inquiries come out from people who are skeptics. And this is like very low level, but he thinks it's high level. And he thinks Christians want to answer it. So I want to dig into that. Anybody else got anything before we get into the video?
Yes, we got comments from Dr. A. Williams. Just dial potatoes and marshmallows instead of expensive eggs now. Just buy the plastic eggs. Comment on us talking about Easter. Shout out to Dr. A. Williams.
Yeah, so on that point right there, one of the things that I saw historically of why we paint eggs isn't related to some kind of pagan religion, but just that there was a certain time period where the eggs were relevant, and so they would hard boil the eggs so they would last longer. And then I can't remember who it was, some king, he would paint the eggs and give them out, but it wasn't an act of pagan worship. It was they hard boiled them so they would last longer, and then he painted them and give them out as gifts and stuff like that.
It's for the children. That's what it's for.
It wasn't a pagan thing.
We want to make this more palatable for the children. Get them involved.
All right.
If you give the children, bounce them off my knee. And I sing that, y'all, because they announced it last week or week before that they're going to do a Martin spinoff. It was Tommy Lee Davidson and Varnell Hill show So they're gonna do a spinoff of the Martin Show. They've already announced it's official, and that's one of the songs he sung in the song.
Yes. Have you
about the
seen the
children.
little clip? Have you seen the clip?
Hollywood Swinging is the name of the episode, y'all. And the Martin Show is my favorite episode of all time. So I'm really excited about this new spinoff they're gonna be
Shaboing
doing.
boing.
It's the bar now, man can. Shaboing boing.
Oh man, they got an updated clip. Y'all go watch that. It's funny. I
I
think
haven't seen it.
if they do a good job about it, then it's gonna be all right.
Yes.
All right, 10 hard questions Christians should ask themselves, but won't. All right, let's get into it.
So we're just gonna stop it.
What
as
if
we see
everything
fit.
you believe about
I'm sorry, you said what, Vulcan?
I was saying, so we're just gonna, so just the audience knows, we're gonna just stop it as we see the to address and stuff, some of the stuff he's saying.
All right, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
Breakdown.
God was given to you by people who had no idea what they were talking about? I mean it. What if your entire understanding of faith, your deepest convictions were built on nothing but hand-me-down beliefs passed down by people who never questioned it either? Now ask yourself this. If your religion wasn't true, how would you even know? Would you
All right, can we
question
pause
it?
it right there?
Would you even want to?
Now, shout out to Durante. I think that's his name. I definitely appreciate the video he did here. I can tell he definitely put effort into it. Looks like he's reading off of the teleprompter or something like that. So that takes a lot of effort to pre-write that and then record it that way. So I shout out to him. I want to do that more myself. But one thing he started off by saying is that these people passed this stuff down and they didn't know if it was true either. When you read the Bible, which is an historical account, talk to historians, it is an historical account. You see Luke make it painstakingly clear that he evaluated and went and researched the events in the book of Acts. So when he tells people didn't know this stuff is true, that's not a reflection of the Bible itself, because especially the New Testament specifically, which is what I'm focusing on, is that they actually would do the research. The Bereans in the Bible were called the most noblest of the Jews because they were searching to see if what Paul was teaching was true. So that goes against what he's talking about. You got Luke talking about that he gave a careful account of it, and he researched and talked to people who were there for the events, the eyewitnesses. So he went out. Luke was a physician. He did his due diligence to make sure what he was saying was true. So again, he's already giving a caricature of it that's unfactual. It's not true. It's alternative facts, as some would say. So he's already starting off with a bad foundation.
Yeah, he also looks like Calvin from Paid in Full. So I don't know if I trust him anyway.
Yeah. And the way I heard it, if you want to think about Luke could be considered a journalist. He followed all the proper journalistic rules you need to investigate and write out historical accounts. So
yeah.
I also don't understand a lot of the critiques that folks have in terms of whether it's truthful or whether it's able to be proven of religions that have faith built into them. It's like they're ignoring the fact that there is faith built into the belief of this religion. So there may not be things that you can prove, that you can hard prove, but that's where the faith comes in.
And that's what everything in life, not just
that's
religion.
what everything in life. You can't prove that you're breathing air right now, and yet you get up every morning and
shout out to Morpheus. You think you're breathing air right now?
Well,
because if you've never truly examined it, then is it really your belief, or is it just someone else's that you've never dared to let go? Let's talk about it. What if you were born in a different country with a different religion? Let's say you were born in India. Would you still believe Jesus was the Son of God? What if you grew up in Saudi Arabia? Would you still be a Christian? Because here's the thing, most people don't choose their religion, they inherit it. If you're a Christian in America, it's not because you conducted a global search for truth and Christianity won the competition. It's because you happen to be born into a society where that belief system was already dominant. If you had been raised in a devout Hindu family, you'd probably be Hindu. If you had been raised in a strict Muslim household, you'd probably be Muslim. If you were born into a Jewish Orthodox community, you'd probably be Jewish. Now, here's where it gets uncomfortable. You might think your religion is true and all the others are all mistaken, right?
So I want to deal with the origin before he gets into more relativistic perspectives. But what he's saying is true statistically speaking, but it's irrelevant logically. So just because people in India tend to be whatever religion of the people they're there, and people in America tend to be more Christian or whatever the case may be, has nothing to do with the truth or falsity of the claim. Has nothing to do with that. That's again the genetic fallacy we
What
talked about
fallacy? Yeah, there
before.
we go.
It's a genetic fallacy again. It doesn't matter how people came to arrive at that belief as far as if we're considering how truthful the claim is. Now, if a sociologist wants to understand, or armchair sociologist even wants to understand how people came to arrive at a certain belief, it may be important to look at the origins and then the social structures of the time and the social ties and who conquered who and all that kind of things. That's important historical sociological information to understand how people group came to arrive at a certain belief. If conquistadors come to a certain place, people are worshiping, Zeus, or they're worshiping whatever, hypothetically speaking, all of a sudden 10, 15, 20 years from now, they're mostly Christian, then yes, it's historically relevant to know that that place got taken over by conquistadors who were Roman Catholic, whatever the case may be, and now that place is Roman Catholic. So historical, that's important to know. That has nothing to do whether or not one belief is more truthful than the other. That's a completely different conversation, completely different discipline. That's more of epistemology than it is historical understanding of what preceded what and what preceded what. So again, he's doing a category error to some extent if he's trying to in some way insinuate that, you should doubt whether or not your belief is true because of how you came to believe that. Those are two separate
He's counting on
things.
your lack of attention to detail when he's doing this, though.
Yes, and your lack of critical thinking and understanding of logical fallacies, which is what he seems to be employing here.
And that's where the Vulcan soapbox comes in.
Vulcan
Well,
soapbox.
guess what? A Buddhist monk in Thailand is just as convinced that their tradition is the right one. So the real question is, do you believe Christianity is true because it's actually true, or because it's the only version of faith you were given?
Sorry,
Why does
pause
an
it real quick.
all-powerful, all-loving God need people to defend him?
I'll make this real short. People got to understand, and I think he's probably coming out from a Judeo-Christian background. I didn't get a chance to look him up a whole lot before the show, but people that were raised in a Judeo-Christian context, be it Islam, or I'll say Abrahamic context, be it Islam or Jews or Christians, they tend to think that all religions are like those. Other religions incorporate other religions just fine. Buddhists, it's fine to be Buddhist, and you could be a Christian Buddhist, you could be a Muslim Buddhist, you can be a Hindu Buddhist. Those are not contradictory. Now, Islam, Christianity, and Judaism are very exclusive religions, but that's not the case for most religions. The Romans picked up a lot of the Greek religions. They just switched the names to make them Roman. So you got Jupiter,
The Greek gods,
yeah, they're very similar. And so what happens is they'll pick up gods, they trade gods like baseball cards. One of the reasons why Christians were historically persecuted and hated was because they were so exclusive with their gods. You see that with Paul in the book of Acts when they went to Areopagus, when he was like, there's this unknown God that y'all don't know about, and it's the true God. This is the God not made with man, not made with hands. So one of the reasons why the Romans detested Christians so much is because they would say there's only one God. But the Romans believed that there was a bunch of gods. It's fine. So when he says that there's a Buddhist monk that believes their religion is just as, truth as yours, that's not necessarily true. They don't really look at truth the same way as Christians. And absolute truth claims, that's very Judeo-Christian in itself. To make an absolute truth claim to say this is true in the universe, period. That's a very Judeo-Christian thing to believe. There are other religions who believe that truth is relative, and that truth is that God is all things. And so all things are true. So you got to understand that he's already applying a Christian or Judeo-Christian or Abrahamic lens, and he's making all the religions myopic in that way, saying they all think like you think. No, that's not true. Buddhists can coexist in Rome just fine. It's Christians who will be killed. It'll be Jews who will be killed for their beliefs in Rome because they say there's only one. That's it. But that's more of a rare thing in religion than a very common thing in religion. We just think it's very common because most of us don't study other religions outside of our own. So we just assume that the other religions are kind of similar to ours with just different names. It's not true. Even believing in absolute truth is a rarity in religion. We can continue, Enos.
You were given. Why does an all-powerful, all-loving God need people to defend him? If God is all-powerful, all-knowing, and the ultimate truth of the universe, why does he need you to argue for him? I mean, really, wouldn't the truth speak for itself? If something is so undeniably real, why would it require constant apologetics, debates, and justifications? If gravity is real, you don't need an entire industry of defenders writing books, hosting conferences, and telling people to just have faith in it. Gravity proves itself every single day. So why doesn't God? If God really wanted everyone to know him, why wouldn't he just reveal himself? Why would he need a bunch of people arguing on his behalf, debating theology and defending his existence with
'Cause he don't care what you
philosophical
think,
wordplay?
nigga.
It doesn't add up. Either God is hiding on purpose, or maybe he's just not there. No one needs to write apologetic books for oxygen. No one needs to hold conferences to prove sunlight exists. But God, apparently, he needs entire seminaries, millions of sermons, countless theological debates, and a 2,000-year-long defense campaign just to keep people convinced. If that's not a red flag, what is? Because if God were actually as real, present, and active as believers claim, then why would he ever need you to explain him?
Can we
If the
pause this real
Bible is the
quick?
ultimate moral guide,
We're about to go to the morals element, but what he's talking about is often referred to as divine hiddenness. And I forgot the guy who really made this popular, but again, this is false in a lot of different ways. Now, y'all, all the folks out there that's hearing my voice right now, understand what I'm gonna say is not a proof for God. So if you're atheist, agnostic, some other religion, you don't have to hate what I'm gonna say just because I'm on a different side than you were on this issue. What I'm gonna say is not gonna be a rebuttal to his point about the disbelief in the Bible. It's gonna be a rebuttal to his argumentation, his how valid his form of argumentation is. So when he says truth doesn't need a defense, that's patently false. Anybody who's ever dealt with the cops, anybody's ever been dealt with court, even for a ticket, understand that truth definitely needs to be defended. Anybody who's dealt with the parent who accused you of something because it looked like you did something that you didn't do, to where if you were the parent, you would probably thought you did it, but you didn't happen to do it. Truth, very much so at times, needs to be defended because evidence is different than the truth. Evidence can be against you even if you're in the right. Evidence can be for you even if you're in the wrong. So you got to understand that truth very much needs to be defended at times. Because what happens with truth is we're not observing things as it's truth. We're observing things from the limited vantage point that we happen to be in. And we're looking at whatever we can see as perceived evidence. And sometimes it doesn't look good for us. How many times have y'all been in situations where you're in a situation like, man, if somebody saw this, there's no way I could defend that it's not what it looks like right now. Whether you're at work, with the coworker. I remember I had a lady that I was kicking it with, and I'm a fidgeter, right? So I'm a fidgeter. So I was walking in Austin, Texas at the Domain, and I saw this loop earring on the floor. So I pick up this loop earring, and I'm just kind of playing with it while I'm walking throughout the Domain or whatever, having a good time. And I get into my car and leave it there. Completely forget about I was fidgeting with that loop earring right there, right? A year or so later, I have a lady in the car with me. She picks it up. She's like, what's this? All I can do is laugh.
Proof that Vulcan don't clean out his car a year later is crazy. You still had a hoop earring in your car from a year ago that you picked up off the ground?
Cup holder. I think it was at the bottom of the cup holder. I never saw it again.
Golly, man.
But Boop, what's this? And I'm thinking in my head, like, I gotta try to explain this is not what it looks like. You know what I'm saying? There's no way to explain it's not what it looks like. That's happened to me numerous times. Last story I'll give, when I was in middle school.
There's a whole profession that exists based on defending the truth.
Yes.
Come on now. If he's ever used a lawyer in any sort of dispute, He's wilding right now.
Yeah, people get put in prison all the time, and then when DNA was invented, it absolved them. But the evidence at the time looked like they were guilty, and then DNA absolved them. And even once you have DNA, people sometimes through a confession, people get convicted of crimes, and then they have to get the person, somebody who accused them, to confess they were lying late after the fact because the evidence pointed to them being guilty.
Shoot, since the advent of go ahead.
So I was gonna give a little quick example anecdotally again. I was in middle school, and somehow there was a lighter under me.
Nah, he said somehow he did it.
So I'm in the office. And I'm about to get in trouble because they said I brought a lighter to school. And the only reason why I didn't get in trouble for it was a janitor happened to hear over the intercom what was going on and said, "That's my lighter." He probably lost his job. I don't know what happened to that guy. But it looked like I was guilty. They believed I was guilty until somebody else happened to hear what's going on. Go, no, that's my lighter right there.
I mean, just look at, I won't say since the dawn, but over the last like 20 to 30 years, footage would absolve you. Video footage would absolve you of crimes if it existed. But now with the advent of AI, even that's not going to be able to prove the truth. So truth is not subjective, but it does need proving.
Yeah, absolutely right. You see this all the time. News findings suggest that maybe this particular people group didn't have this technology or didn't have this access technology. You see it all the time in archaeological findings. You see that all the time in scientific discovery. They just found this. At one point in time, they thought the oxygen only could be created one way. Now they're saying there's dark oxygen where somewhere in the ocean they're able to create this. Oxygen is being created by this process that they didn't really know existed or couldn't confirm existed. Truth oftentimes needs somebody to advocate on its behalf because, one, as human beings, we're flawed in our thinking, and sometimes we come to erroneous conclusions. Sometimes the evidence just happens to be lying on one side of the aisle more than the other side of the aisle all the time because of limited vantage point as human beings, maybe because some things haven't been dug up yet or certain questions haven't been asked yet. So you got to understand that even y'all, listen to what this guy is saying. When he says that truth does not need to be defended, that is absolutely false. What is he doing right now?
False.
He's defending what he thinks is true right now.
Oh man, you beat me to it. I was just about to say that.
My fault, big time. My fault.
He's certain that his point of view is correct. So much so that he got on video to put it on the internet. Come on, sir.
Absolutely right. So we can keep going, he knows. The wave's listening over there.
Why do so many Christians disagree on what it says? One Bible, 40,000 plus denominations. Think about that for a second. I mean, we're not talking about small, insignificant differences. We're talking about fundamental contradictions. Some Christians say baptism is essential for salvation. Others say it's just symbolic. Some say LGBTQ plus people are welcomed and loved by God. Others say they're an abomination. Some say women can preach. Others say the Bible forbids it. Some say salvation is by faith alone. Others say it requires works. So which is it? How is it that a book supposedly written or inspired by an all-knowing, all-powerful God is so unclear that even his most devoted followers can't agree on what it actually says? Wouldn't an all-wise, all-loving deity make sure his most important message was crystal clear? And before you say, well, people just misinterpret it, ask yourselves, if millions of people are misinterpreting it, then isn't that a design flaw? Because God could have done literally anything to make sure his word was unmistakable. He could have written it in the sky. He could have embedded it into human DNA. He could have made it impossible to misunderstand. Instead, we have a collection of ancient texts copied by scribes, translated by committees, edited by religious councils, and used to justify completely opposite beliefs. So either God is a terrible communicator,
real quick.
Or maybe this book just
is.
Go
ahead.
Go ahead, Fresh.
I'm gonna just say this real quick. It's crazy that people look at deities and they are so impressed with themselves, and I'm saying they have so much confidence in themselves that they think that anything, basically any deity, right, should operate along the same rules that not only they understand but that they agree with. It's like it don't make sense to me, so it can't be real. Who are you? That's so weird. Go ahead.
I mean, a lot of these folks, I want to see what their grades were in school. I've seen people critique these ancient texts and stuff that were terrible students. They were just flat out incompetent. It's like, why is it the incompetent ones who have so much confidence in their deductions?
They don't know enough to not be competent.
That's the Dunning-Kruger effect, I believe. But he mentions Christians disagree on what it says. But the reality is this: if you talk to a police officer, I've seen wrecks happen, and people are watching a wreck or a fight, and people could be watching the same fight and have 6 different accounts. Does that mean the fight didn't happen?
Exactly. Perspective.
It's perspective. It's people are fallible. People have different understandings of things, different language barriers. You might talk to somebody whose third language is English. They're a very limited ability to use the English language is going to affect how they communicate what they saw. So we got to realize this when it comes to what he's talking about right here, when he talks about people having different perspectives and stuff. This is the logical fallacy. He said God could have communicated in a way that all of us would understand and believe. The only way for God to do that is if he would make us perfect perceivers. We have to be perfect.
And he's saying he could have done that.
Yeah, so if he makes us perfect perceivers, we're not humans anymore. We're gods
we're
ourselves.
machines.
We have machines.
It removes the free will aspect of it, which is integral into the faith.
Yes, if you're going to
the free will of it all,
absolutely,
is part of it.
Absolutely right. If somebody's not going to study critical thinking like this guy, they're going to be prone to delusional perspectives on things and invalid reasoning. So when we ask them to articulate what they've seen, what they believe, why they believe it, it's going to be riddled with flaws because of the fact that they haven't done a due diligence like this guy who's talking right now to understand how critical thinking works on a level that's consummate with whatever he's trying to communicate. So that's why I'm saying, like, this guy is an accurate picture of the problem and what he's saying. You can't expect people to be perfect perceivers. So God's working with fallible human beings. That's what we are. And so there's no way to communicate a perfect perception to fallible human beings. That's a contradiction. And God does not work in logical contradictions. God is the author. He is the author of logic. Logic is an extension of how his mind works. So God's not going to make a square circle and things of that nature because that's a contradiction in terms. So he can't make a flawed perceiver understand something flawlessly. It's impossible. And the level of questioning, and so when he's saying that God can make it in a way that we would never believe it, we would never disbelieve, that's not true. Also, that you're assuming what God's purpose is.
Thank you.
You don't know what God's purpose is and why God chose this way. It goes to what Freshly was talking about earlier. You're an ant trying to perceive a human being. That chasm is even smaller than the chasm of you trying to understand a deity, you being a sentient being who's going to be on this earth for 120 years max.
Right.
You know, and if you're on earth for 120 years, most of that you won't even be mentally relevant. You'll be like a vegetable for a lot of that. So my point is saying that you try to understand a deity is worse than an ant trying to understand a human being.
Facts.
So
he's suffering from confirmation bias in a huge way. He went on the internet, he did some research to support the views that he already had to come on here and attack Christianity.
Absolutely,
which is common. No, I'm not. I won't say I'm mad at him. We're pointing out the flaws in his logic, the flaws in his reasoning.
Yes, meaning I haven't said he's wrong in his conclusion.
He's wrong in his methods of getting to those conclusions.
Invalid reasoning. Look it up, y'all, when you get a chance to, all the folks out there. Invalid reasoning is different than saying somebody's conclusion is incorrect. Somebody can have a correct conclusion and have invalid reasoning. Mm-hmm. Somebody can have valid reasoning and have a wrong conclusion.
The sky is blue because my... Oh, you know what? No.
Alligators
ornery. Mama says, yeah.
Alligators ornery say I don't teeth and no toothbrush. It is true that alligators are ornery. And crocodiles even more ornery than alligators. But it's not because they have no teeth and no toothbrush. Yes. That's an example of having invalid reasoning, but having a correct conclusion. Another way, somebody could be like, people have two legs. And that's why they're faster than leopards because they have less legs to work with to have to be accountable for. That's true that human beings have 2 legs, but the reasoning is false. That might be the same example twice, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, it's all right. They might have needed it 2 times.
Mike
Like,
secret
that's
stuff.
the same thing.
Isn't divine at all because of the double communicator, or maybe this book just isn't divine at all. Because if the Bible was truly the perfect word of God, there wouldn't be 40,000 different ways to read it. If God wants a relationship with us, why does he make himself so hard to find? Let's be real. So many believers
ain't hard to
struggle with
find.
doubt, and
He
not
hard to
just
find for
small
you.
doubts, deep, painful, gut-wrenching doubt. They
God,
pray,
where are you?
they beg for signs, they
Lord, I can't
fast,
find you.
they cry, they throw themselves at the altar, desperate for just a glimpse of God's presence. And yet, nothing. Silence. And for a religion that claims God wants a relationship with us, that should be concerning. Think about it. The Abrahamic religions tells us that God is like a loving father who deeply desires connections with his children. But what kind of father hides from his kids? If your earthly father ignored your calls, never showed up when you needed him, and refused to acknowledge you, would you still believe that he loved you? But when God does it, you're told he's testing your faith. You're told, just wait, he'll show up in his own time. You're told you just have to believe harder. But at what point do you stop making excuses for someone who never shows up? Because if an all-powerful, all-loving God actually wanted to be known, wouldn't he just make himself known? Wouldn't he communicate clearly, directly, and unmistakably? Instead, believers spend their entire lives chasing a feeling, second-guessing themselves, wondering if God is speaking or if it's just their own thoughts. Spoiler alert, it's just your own thoughts.
Can we pause it real quick?
And at some
I just want to show this real quick to the audience out here. So people always talk about the Bible has 1,000 different interpretations and this, and this, and this, and this. And to me, this is all hyperbole and a distraction. It's a red herring.
It is. Yeah.
Most of the Bible is very easy to interpret. It doesn't take any type of special interpretation. So what I'm going to do, I have a Bible right here. I'm just going to randomly pick something right here and read with my fingers on. It says, do not hold us guilty for the sins of our ancestors. What metaphorical interpretation is that? That's Psalms 79:8. I'm gonna pick another random one. Yeah, let me see here. It says right here, I'm in 1 Chronicles 18:5. When Arameans from Damascus arrived to help King Hadadezer, David killed 22,000 of them. Is that some kind of metaphorical interpretation? Is there a big dispute on this interpretation right there?
No.
99% of the Bible, there's no dispute on the interpretation there.
It's historical.
It's just telling you what happened. Paul walked to Damascus.
The son of 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 the father of the son of the son.
So people say
was
there's
over
thousands
here.
of interpretations, and there's 40 different. We're talking about people who get into the weeds of doctrine. So yes, intellectuals are gonna debate and dispute every morsel of information because that's what intellectuals do. That's fun. We love it, and some of those details can be important for certain things. But generally, the Bible is a very easy book to understand with very rudimentary things in there that everybody understands and gets. So when you have guys like this who make it seem like there's 40,000 denominations and they debate on all these different things right here, their denominations are not considered cults because they agree on pretty much everything. There's just certain specific things they disagree about. And so when he says,
Vulcan.
And so when he says millions of people have different interpretations, yeah, there's over like 1 billion people, and there's like 2.4 billion Christians. So even if it's 50 million people who have a different interpretation, that's a fraction of a religion that has 1/3 of the human population as its adherents.
I would also challenge him to tell me the one thing that 100% of people across the nation agree on.
Yes, he says that nobody's debating oxygen and gravity, but do a quick
There
Google
are.
search out there, folks. there are
Yeah.
people who are definitely disputing about gravity and how we have gravity and why we have gravity and all those different kind of things. All
Yep.
of it's disputed. That's how science advances. You have Isaac Newton's theories. You have Galileo's and Copernicus' theories. Those are challenged. They were challenging the thought of its day. And people challenge those thoughts now. Heliocentric, geocentric universe, you know,
Yep.
or solar system, whatever the case may be. These
And
things are always being challenged. That's a good thing.
the more technology evolves, the more information that's available to us, things will be challenged. That's just the nature of human beings.
Yes, no offense, Freshly and Enos, but I know y'all are up there in age. When y'all were growing up, Pluto was a planet.
No.
Let's keep it
No.
real. Keep it real. Am I
He
lying?
said, y'all.
Yeah, it's just a
Am I
rock
lying?
right now.
Nah. Ain't no way you did us like that.
There was 9 planets when y'all was growing up, right? Am I tripping?
Nah.
So
The reason
nobody challenged that.
listen, folks, the reason that that's so outlandish is because Vulcan is the same age as us. He trying to play us real quick.
Yeah, hey. It's okay. So this guy again, y'all, it's another red herring, a distraction. The point that he's making may be true, that people do have different beliefs and different things are interpreted different kind of ways, but it's a distraction because that's true of everything. Mathematics is being challenged, and you see what Terrence Howard has been doing and Billy Carson's been doing with mathematics. They're challenging, traditional mathematics. They even had Eric Weinstein on Joe Rogan podcast discussing those kind of things.
Yeah.
So again, two plus two, 1 times 1, 2 times 2 was being challenged on the Joe Rogan podcast, and millions of people are taking different sides. It's okay. It doesn't make one side right or one side wrong.
Beware of the Moriarty in your
somebody
story.
saying because they challenge it 1 times 1 and 2 times 2, the mathematics, all of it's wrong. You know, that's basically what this guy is doing. Because
Absolutely right. So I just want to say, I did that. I just pick random verses. Do it when you get home. For I'm Israel's fathers, and Ephraim is my oldest child. If you just pick up a Bible and pull up random scriptures and stuff like that, you're going to find that 99% of what's in here is not something that's controversial or people are trying to figure out what the main meaning is. Now, they may dispute historical parts of the terms and things like that because that's what intellectuals do. The devil's in the details a lot of times, so they're going to want to figure out the most minute of details. But the general meaning is pretty common and pretty universally understood. Even when it comes to the Bible, specifically the New Testament, historians generally agree on a core amount of facts about Jesus, about his death, about his resurrection, all that. His death, his burial, about the soldiers not finding his body in the tomb. These things are part of the historical core that both historians that are atheistic and Christian and Hindu and Buddhist, they all tend to agree on certain core facts. It's not as controversial as he's making it seem. He wants it to be relative to where none of us can think about it or do anything about it. It's all just throw it up in the air and then see what lands. That's not how this stuff works.
He's looking. He's talking to the confirmation bias individuals. He made this because he hasn't offered anything that would sway a devout Christian who has he hasn't offered any of that. He's trying to distract you. He's looking for the people who are on the fence, who haven't done their due diligence in reading the word and understanding the text and all that stuff. This is why this show exists. When we kind of look at some of these speakers, and I'm not going to get too deep off into it, but just to reiterate, we're not saying right or wrong. We're saying look at the makeup of the argument. Look at what he's saying, why, and the how he's saying it, which everyone has the ability to do. When people are saying stuff like this, and notice when they're doing these things, these tactics that they're using, they're not being fully truthful with you. Their views are skewed, and they're skewed on purpose. So it's not a completely objective point of view, which is what they would have you believe. And this guy is you scratch the surface and it's right there. So he's not even doing a good job at it.
Shout out.
And so last thing I'll say on that topic is that there's been plenty of atheistic people Lee Strobel was the most notable one that came out recently. He wrote a whole book called The Case for Christ, where he was an atheist and his wife was a Christian, and he wanted to disprove Christianity once and for all. So he started he was a legal journalist. He wanted to use his legal background, his journalist background, in order to disprove Christianity. He ended up becoming a Christian when he looked at all the evidence for it. He's not the first. You got C.S. Lewis. You have, I forgot
C.S.
a
Lewis is
lawyer.
a good one.
Yeah, I forgot there's a lawyer who at one point in time used his understanding of corroboration and the science of how to determine what has the best explanation and stuff like that for certain events. And he became a Christian. I was an atheist. So I'm not saying that just because you're that you'll become a Christian. My point is saying this: there are people who are diligent about the evidence, who don't have confirmation bias, because Lee Strobel specifically set out to disprove Christianity. So his bias was against Christianity, but his conviction to trying to be honest and intellectually, consistent, led him to become a Christian when he looked at the evidence. Does that mean this guy is wrong in what he's saying? It doesn't mean he's wrong. I'm just pointing out the fact that his reasoning for what he's saying is invalid. And you got to be on guard for that, whether it's somebody in the pulpit or him. If somebody's using invalid reasoning, if you watch our episode, you see us critiquing pastors in the pulpit all the time about their invalid reasoning. Everybody can get it. So we don't care who it is. Let's go. Let's get it.
Bang. Shit like that.
At some point, you have to ask yourself, is God really there? Or have we just been trained to interpret silence as presence? Because if God's greatest desire is for us to know him, why does he make it feel impossible? Why do miracles
Can you
only
pause it
seem
real
to
quick?
happen in ways that...
I'm going to just point this out. He's speaking for only one side of that argument. And I say that because he's saying, why do we interpret silence for presence? There's a whole nother side of people who understand it differently, who he's not even, like, if he's being objective, he's not even taking those folks into consideration. He's speaking for the naysayers, if you will. So he's not even espousing both sides of the argument. So he's not even being intellectually diligent here. He's go ahead.
I was gonna say, Fresh. I think. What would you say to people who say that because of your wrinkled background, you're displaying faulty reasoning?
I would say
genetic fallacy.
It is a genetic fallacy. I would say, listen, correlation is not causation, big dog. that background, while it is wrinkled, don't have nothing to do with what we're talking about right now. Now get off my back. I got an iron and some Stay Flow.
Shout out to Health the Bear says the same. What was this? I forgot what topic we was on. It's the same as walking in the bathroom and the urine is everywhere. You walk out and somebody comes right in and they think you peed everywhere.
Yes, that's facts. Hey, how many times you been in a public stall?
Yeah.
And then you go in there just to wipe your nose or to look in the mirror real quick, and it's funky up in there. Yep. Or the restroom is terrible. Look like a storm went through it, and then you walk out and they're gonna assume that you're the one who did all that chaos in there.
Because correlation. He was the last person in here, so it must have been him. Man, it was like that before I came in. It's not all about perspective, but perspective is a big part of deducing when you're utilizing logic and reasoning.
Especially when the unisex restrooms are there and you got a nice lady that's walking in behind you, like, well, don't think this is me. This was not me who did all this stuff in here.
Yeah. Exactly. They acting like, if you look a certain way, you couldn't possibly do that. There's so many different perspectives and interpretations of stuff that is very hard to stick that on one person, which is why it is a huge pothole in the road of logic and reasoning. It's why it's one of the biggest and most common fallacies, because people are so short-sighted when it comes to that they're waiting to find something that falls into that box, whether or not it fills in all the edges or not. Like, you fix in there, so it works. Yeah, but what about all this dead space around here? What about that stuff? Nah, I don't want to deal with that. It's in there. Close enough.
All right. Help the Bear, Vulcan 2 times logic. So nice. Glad to Glad to say it twice. Yeah, that was earlier.
What?
You made a good point twice. I
Help the
think
Bear
it's
said, I
mostly
think,
about what is in the red that is disputed. Oh, okay. That's when Jesus was talking in the Bible.
Red letter. Yeah.
Red letters.
the red letter
Red
disputes.
Yeah, in the red. All right, so Help the Bear said Pluto is the future. Shout out to Future, man. When he's Atlanta Rushmore.
Legend.
Yeah, top rappers.
Nah, he's not. I don't think you can put him on Rushmore.
That's what they say. I see after that R&B with
Yeah.
Mount Rushmore, with you see a bunch of variations of that
Yeah.
meme float around online. And shout out,
I
what
s-
up? Jason Rucker said, agree. Okay. All right, let's get back into the video. Shout out to Jason.
That can't be tested. People claim them all the time. God healed my headache. God helped me find my car keys. God made sure I got that promotion. But let me ask you something. Why don't amputees grow their limbs back? Why don't stage 4 cancer patients suddenly recover without treatment? Why don't we ever see clear, undeniable supernatural events that defy every known law of physics? Because here's the thing. Whenever a so-called miracle happens, it's always something that could have happened naturally, can't be objectively verified, depends entirely on personal interpretation. And when we actually test these claims, they fall apart every single time. Prayer studies have been conducted.
What about examples?
No measurable impact.
You don't got
Faith
no
healing
examples?
events have been studied.
Awesome.
No supernatural recoveries. Every time we investigate a so-called miracle, it turns out to be a coincidence, medical intervention, or a well-dressed lie. So much so that many believers have gone as far as to say God just doesn't like to be tested. Now think about what that means.
Let's
If
pause that.
miracles were
It depends. What does he mean by testing a miracle? If you take the approach that a miracle is something that's outside of the physical world, the empirical world, there's no way to test it. The only way we can test miracles is scientifically. That means it's going to be based off the laws of uniformity. It's going to be based off the laws of cause and effect. Now, if a miracle is outside of that world, we don't have any way of testing that thing. We don't have an epistemology available to us. So audience out there, Vulcan, all the folks out there, epistemology is the study of how do we know what we know. It's one of the most important sciences you'll ever learn in your life because it affects everything. Anytime you want to know something, you're using a form of epistemology. And the thing is that we don't have an epistemology available to us to even really discern the truth or falseness of a miracle.
And he would have you believe that's a short-sightedness on God's part as opposed to a limitation of
it's
human
a limitation
beings.
on our part. You know, it's just like sometimes I'm talking to my kids and they may have a certain perspective. Like, well, you know, I'm like, I don't need y'all to verify what I got going on right now or not going on. You know what I'm saying? This is above and beyond y'all.
Yeah, you have a certain level of understanding that
exactly.
you could, even if I did explain it to you, you couldn't grasp it.
You wouldn't fully understand it. Yeah.
Yeah, you don't have the capabilities.
And that lack of understanding would probably cause you more trouble than anything else. And this goes back to this. So the audience out there, this is called divine hiddenness. It's the idea that, you know, why is it not evident to everybody that God exists or that whatever people say that Christianity is true and all that kind of stuff like that. But the Bible says this, it's the glory of God to conceal a matter and the glory of a king to search it out. There is a richness, there is a strength in learning things and figuring things out. Remember your school days when you're back in elementary school, anybody who has kids, you understand that. You can give your kids the answers. You can tell your kids, hey, this is the answer right here. But good parents don't do that because the process to go from not knowing to knowing, all that interim right there, there's such a character buildup and a knowledge buildup in that. So yes, we are like children in a lot of ways that some things are hidden by God. How many times have we thought something or wondered something and then we finally came to understand it? We're like, you know, if it would have just been beamed in my head at the time that I wanted it, I would never be where I am today.
If I want you to seek my face, what good is it if I pop up wherever you at every time, whether you sought me out or not?
Absolutely right.
You let your kid fall off of things because they need to learn not to get up on those things. You need to learn the dangers. There's so many correlations that I mean I'm here to get my shots up, but this guy's not even doing a good job. He's not even doing a good job right now.
Last thing I'll say about that is one method you'll see used a lot of times to help people in their progression of understanding something, a Socratic method.
Socratic, yeah.
people ask you questions that help to grow your critical thinking, to help grow your ability to question things and be critical by asking you the right kind of questions so that your mind can start to bridge those gaps. That immediate gratification of getting information, so a lot of times, is hurtful. It's not
harmful
helpful.
to you,
Yeah,
to your development,
exactly.
All right. Shout
So
out to
so
Help
you
the Bear
people
saying,
keep that
did
in
you
mind.
drink?
Yeah, and the theme of development exists throughout the Bible. Is in terms of just popping up and handing it over. That happens very few times in the Bible, and only in extenuating circumstances.
You see
Most
that
of
with
these,
Joseph.
yeah,
Joseph was sold into slavery, ended up at Potiphar's place, ended up in a dungeon, ended up becoming the person who was Israel's redemption, basically. But he went through a maturation process in that whole thing.
Yeah.
And his understanding and how grateful he was, and understanding of what was given to him and the power that he had to help his people, that was developed over time.
Yep. Jonah got put on punishment when he disobeyed. He had to go sit in his room. When he came out, he was better for it. And God got the glory, and he got some development out of Jonah.
So people got to understand. There's this quote, and I'm not going to be able to say it because I'm not going to remember how it goes at all. But one of my favorite movies is a movie called Limitless. And you see this guy Limitless. He was given certain gifts because he took a pill. Bless you. He took a pill, and when he took this pill, it gave him these abilities that were almost very miraculous abilities, godlike abilities. To be able to, his recall was second to none. He was able to access his subconscious.
And they broke him.
And what happens is he starts to work with Robert De Niro's character. Yes, Robert De Niro's character, who was a very wealthy man who had achieved all of his success through hard work and diligence. And there was a scene where they had some kind of success financially, and he was saying, "Hey, look, I'm gonna give you a card, and you can get your toys and stuff you want with it." And he said, "Don't think about leaving me." And the main character, Bradley Cooper, I think his name is, the main character, is debating, and he goes, "Hey, look, I don't know how you got your gifts." He figures out by the end of the movie how he got his gifts, but he didn't know at the time how he had his gifts to be able to do what he was doing. But he said, he goes, "But the fact you're able to have these gifts by God or however you got these gifts, do not undermine the development that I went through to get where I am. You haven't gone through that development. So there's certain things you don't have. That come through development and through trials and through having to fail and succeed, that you circumvent a lot of those things to get where you are. And so there's a deficit there that you may or may not recognize. And that's exactly what we're talking about with this guy right here, not understanding that development, the fact that we don't know all things, we have to work and have pain and struggle to arrive at certain convictions and understandings and knowledges. Those kind of things right there come the hard way. And you can't shortcut those things if you want to be as strong as you can be at the end of it all. So I think he doesn't understand that concept right there. And it's a very common thing to understand.
I think he does understand it, because if you look in the Bible, if you read the Bible at all, these themes are common. They're espoused often in the Bible. There's very few places in the Bible where God or Jesus Christ is like pictured or represented like a genie, which is essentially what this guy is saying. Like, why doesn't he just do what you want him to do when you need him? He's not a genie. It doesn't work for us. And again, my point is, when you look at the belief system, that dynamic doesn't exist. So he's critiquing the entire belief system based on his already formed biases, while not considering what the actual doctrine says, like what the common themes are. Like, nowhere in the Bible does it show you that God is just going to pop up and do stuff for you, whether, you know what I mean? Let me not say nowhere. Not often in the Bible does God just pop up and do stuff for people who either haven't earned it or don't believe or stuff like that. And the few times he does, you can find those types of stories in modern day, right? I was worshiping the devil. I was outside. I was out there doing all types of evil, and the Lord, appeared to me, or the Lord sent an angel and he spoke. Like, those types of stories exist. And what he's doing is because he doesn't agree with it, right? Confirmation bias. I don't like that version of it. So I'm going to completely do away with that version because it doesn't support my point of view.
Mhm.
I'm just gonna go over here and find the people who have a problem with it, right? So he's speaking to a certain audience. And again, I'm not saying whether he's right or wrong. I just want to point out the method, the tactics that he's using are not intellectually sound. They're not intellectually honest.
Yeah, cherry picking. He's picking certain arguments
He's
that represent his point. Cherry picking fallacy, and that, and you said, freshly, you said that you believed or you think that he does believe or understand what he's doing. And I'm like, that's really bad if he's doing that, because he's robbing other people a chance to build a character to go through the trials they need to do, the trials they need to go to get that gain that kind of wisdom. So
yeah.
that's the, if you understand,
And the reason I think he is because he put this together. You know what I'm saying? I've heard like on the spot arguments, or you go to campuses and you see people debating, right? Sometimes those people say things based on the information that they have available to them at that point, and the emotion or the feelings that they have, right? And they may say something inaccurate or misspeak. But this guy sat down and put this together. He edited it. He had a chance to go back and like really work it down. This is not a lie. This is something that he put out, and there's a whole side of an argument that he's completely ignoring.
Yeah, but that still could be appeal to ignorance. He could still put together things and still don't have the great understanding or vast understanding of what he's saying.
Well,
You
no, the
know,
appeal to ignorance says that that the speaker
I
is
mean, yeah,
counting
I'm
on the
sorry.
fact that you're
Yeah,
ignorant, not
yeah,
that he's
you're right.
ignorant.
Yeah, you're
He's
right
counting on
about
the
that.
fact that his audience is ignorant.
Yeah, he's appealing to the audience ignorance. But with
Correct.
him, he could still be ignorant. Vulcan mentioned this earlier, the Duncan. I can't remember that fallacy, but
Oh, it's an
I think,
effect.
yeah, I maintain that it's possible for him to be ignorant and still put things together and not see all the blind spots and still present this and teach this to people, and definitely be misleading,
I agree with
to the
you in terms
audience,
of high level. I agree with you that he is on in terms of like whether he actually understands or not, because I
Mhm.
feel like if he did actually understand, he wouldn't be doing this. But
Maybe.
he has an understanding of what he's doing, not necessarily what he's saying or whether it's true, but I think he's intentional in what he's doing, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, because we see that with we did a breakdown of, I can't remember his name now, but he was doing the same thing. I forgot. All right, let's get back into the video. Oh, Billy Carson. That's one. Speaking of Billy
Yeah.
Carson, yeah.
Just you're talking about the
Real,
Dunning
truly
Kruger
real.
effect earlier.
Yes,
Just
that's
to
what I'm
clarify.
Yes. Thank you.
We wouldn't need faith to believe in them. We'd see them without question. If miracles were real, truly real, we wouldn't need faith to believe in them. We'd see them without question in every hospital, in every war zone, in every tragedy. But we don't. Instead, believers lower the standards for miracles to the point where anything can be called divine intervention. Found a $20 bill on the ground? Miracle. Ran late for work but missed an accident? Miracle. Landed a job after praying? Miracle. At this point, what even counts as a miracle? Because if we never see amputees regrow their legs, but we call finding a parking spot divine intervention, are miracles real, or are they just coincidences that believers assign meaning to? Listen, before we keep going, I want to invite you to be a part of this community beyond just this conversation. Join my Patreon for exclusive content and behind-the-scenes discussions, and consider becoming a YouTube member and support content that challenges mainstream narratives. Also, hop in our Discord community where we talk, connect, and build together every day. Check the links out
If he
below.
was
We'd love to
really
hear from you.
down with the
All right, let's get back to
struggle,
this
you
conversation.
have his sandals
How
in
do you
Capri
determine which parts are
Zone,
literal
brother.
and which parts are metaphorical? Christians love to say, oh, that part isn't literal. But how do you decide? Seriously, what's the process? Because when you ask about things like Noah's Ark, some say it's just a metaphor. Adam and Eve, some say it's symbolic. Jonah surviving in a fish for 3 days, maybe it's an allegory. But then when you ask about Jesus' resurrection, oh no, that one is definitely literal. Jesus turning water into wine, oh yeah, that happened. Eternal hellfire, real place, no question. So let me get this straight. When the story sounds too absurd to believe, it's just a metaphor. When it's theologically important, it's historical fact. That's not consistency, that's cherry picking. If God is the ultimate author, shouldn't he make it clear which parts are literal and which are symbolic? I mean, we're talking about the eternal salvation here. Heaven, hell, life, death, the very fate of our very souls. And instead of giving us a book that is unmistakably clear, God supposedly gave us a text that requires pastors, theologians, and scholars to properly interpret it, personal discernment to know what's true, centuries of debate just to figure out what it even means. At what point do we admit that if the word of God is this confusing, maybe the problem isn't with us, maybe the problem is the book itself? If God is unchanging, why does
Pause
Christian
it.
opinions on morals shift?
So again, now all the folks out there, think about this. People are going to debate everything. That's just the way it goes. LeBron, Jordan, Kobe. People are going to debate oxygen, gravity, flat Earth. These are all going to be debates for eternity. You know, what's the best mic to use on a podcast? So we got to understand that just because people are debating the issue doesn't mean that the information available to us is unclear. That's human nature.
Just
We're gonna debate things. We want to
in the
figure
words of the venerable daylight, just because you don't understand it doesn't mean he's not dying.
Yes, facts. So
Yeah.
we got to understand that when this guy is communicating, is that this is all just him exposing the fact that he just doesn't like it, and that's okay.
This is a fantastic amount of ego that he's displaying here in saying like, because I don't understand it, because I can't fathom it, because I can't conceptualize it, it must not be true. For that to make sense, he would have to be the smartest person in the world. He would have to be the most intelligent, the most
Funny
well-learned.
Funny enough, the smartest what they have on, there's a YouTube video of a guy who has the highest IQ in the world, and he says that definitely God is real and all that kind of stuff. So if we're gonna go by the smartest man in the world, which I still wouldn't go by that, but even if you're gonna go by that, that's still gonna prove what we're saying right now.
Exactly.
But the funny thing about what this guy is saying right here, when he talks about all the fact that people believe different things, which is he keeps focusing on people to believe this, people believe that. People are very fallible. If you've been around people interact, he doesn't seem like the kind of guy who interacts with people a whole lot. He seems like a very introverted individual. Maybe that's not the case, but he seems very introverted. You would be surprised by the crazy ideologies that people will espouse if you interact with them on a regular basis. It will astound you.
There's flat earthers. They're out there.
Shout out to Lord Jamar.
And even the flat earthers are saying that the earth is flat because of something that they don't know. Like, we can't prove it. So if I can't understand it, then it must not be true. And they're debunking like people who are established in their those fields. Like, no, earth is definitely not flat. It's definitely round. But what do you know? I mean, I am an astrophysicist, so more than you. But the ego of people, right? The incredible ego of people is just like, yeah, I can't understand that. I don't like it. It doesn't make sense to me, so therefore it must not be true.
Exactly. Huh? It's insane.
Huh?
But so to his point, just pointing out the fact that people have different views on all kinds of different stuff does not in any way disprove the belief system itself. It just shows that we're dealing with flawed people. One of the points that a very popular scholar that I hesitate to bring up his name right now, he brings up the fact that you got to understand one of the benefits of organized religion is the fact that it gives a very consistent process of people who are not cognitively elevated. They're not superior intellectually. Think of people who are very simple people. Think about slaves back in chattel slavery. Christianity, Islam, whatever religion you want to pick, gives people a very consistent way of living life.
A system
and what
way
happened?
Of thinking.
Yeah, and so I'll go ahead and say it. It was Sam Harris debating Dr. Jordan Peterson. I would say debating. They were having a nice conversation. And one thing that, Sam Harris was talking about how you can dispel a lot of the different mythology that we see today, and we can elevate beyond some of the archaic traditions and beliefs. And Jordan Peterson brings a really good point. He goes, "What about people who aren't particularly intelligent?" And that was a really good question. Those who interact with people realize there are a lot of people that are not very brilliant. They're not very smart. They're very elementary level thinkers. And whatever type of sophisticated argumentation that you provided, they're not going to understand half of that stuff. One of the benefits of Christianity specifically is that it gives everybody a basis for understanding the world so they can live a good life. Whether it's your grandma, whether it's the intellectual in the ivory tower, it gives everybody consistent based on understanding the world. Christianity wasn't meant to be intellectually rigorous for everybody at all times. It was meant to be for everybody. It means intellectually rigorous for the intellectual. It's also very common sense for the common sense person who's working in the factory and working in the coal mines.
Anecdotally, I was in the Air Force for a little over 10 years. We used to have these safety briefs, and anybody who's in the military can attest to this. We actually used to have these safety briefs, and often enough, the safety briefs would be something ridiculous, something that a person who using basic common sense would never even consider doing. So we're annoyed because it's like, listen, man, why are you wasting our time with this? No, who would do that? But the fact of the matter is, someone somewhere did do it.
Yes.
So when you're talking about creating rules or doctrine for the masses, you have to consider for the lowest common denominator. You have to
Absolutely.
look at you cannot plan for the masses at a high level, because by
That's a
definition,
small percentage of
everyone's
the
not up here.
population.
It's a
Yeah, that's a
very
small
small percentage of the
percentage.
population. Most people are in the middle, and then but you can't also plan for them, because then the lower part of society suffers. So you have to come down here and make it easy for everyone to understand. So the
Yes.
higher up you get, that's where you get the interpretation. That's where you get the debates. But that's what's supposed to happen, because those people have above average intelligence, and this
Yeah.
is what they do.
If I can
But in
interject
terms
what
of,
you're saying, sorry,
go
real
ahead.
quickly, because I want to say that's one of the beautiful things about the Bible specifically. You know, a lot of the Ivy League schools were founded by theologians. So people at the highest intellectual level can spend an eternity studying the scriptures, while the common person who can barely read and be literate can still utilize the scriptures and have a very robust life based off it, the mining whatever they can get from the scriptures as well. It's meant to be for everybody. That's why it's the basis of the greatest civilizations that we are aware of. So people got to understand that when they're looking at the scriptures and stuff of that nature. Even Islam is to some extent, to a lesser extent, I would say, indicative of this. But it's meant to be able for everybody to have access to this wealth of information and utilize it every day. And that's why when people are bringing up all this information, they just discovered this, that, and the other. Is your grandma looking at the discoveries of today's science? No, she's not. But you can read in the Bible, do not steal, obey your parents, and govern her life in a way that's consistent and honorable based off what's reading those texts. And so we got to understand those kind of things. And that's part of there's this elitism with a lot of people like this guy here who
Perfect.
think that everybody's got to be the super intellectuals looking up and researching every single thing, when that's not where most people are. Most people are the common person. Most regions of the world are still literate. And they don't have that knowledge base to even be able to look up, well, this text says right here, and you got to understand that the scientific discovery, blah, 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 here, that scientific discovery that may change 20 years from now.
Yeah. Even if they could read, their level of understanding, their level of comprehension may not be depending on what literature they have access to
Yeah.
in these places in the world, right? It may not be to a certain level that can really dig into some of these scriptures or these words. So it's like, hey, don't steal. Stealing is bad. Almost everyone can understand that, whether you can
Yes.
read or not. That is a concept that's easy to explain, even if you can't read. I can go up to, and here's the thing, I can also explain it to a child, right, in terms that they can understand. So then
Yes.
bring up your child the way they should be brought up. When they're older, they won't depart. So it's built even for children. These are keep in mind, these are adults who are really debating these things, or really trying to dig into these things and disprove it. But I want you to also consider this, and this is not an indictment of anybody in particular. A lot of these folks have personal vendettas, or what I call church hurt. Something in their lives has not gone the way that they thought it should go, and they blame Christianity or Christ. This is like this. If you are a child and you stolen and you struck your mother and your father and you disobeyed them and you got kicked out at some point in time, right? Hey, I'm gone for 20 years. And then all of a sudden, out of the blue, 10 years later, I haven't followed your rules. I ain't called you. I haven't sent you a Christmas card. I ain't said happy birthday, none of that. And I get in the spot of trouble, and I show up at your doorstep like, yo, you can help me out. Now that could go that way, but what person would blame the parent for being like, bro, where have you been? You don't have access to these benefits because you chose not to abide by what we got going on in this house. Now, that's not that, I'm not putting that on Christianity. I'm saying the way the world understands things, the way human beings operate. That's why when you look at the parable of the prodigal son, that's showing a godly disposition.
Yep.
That's not what normal human beings would do. So if you are a person and you've been living your life outside of the will of God, this whole time, and all of a sudden you get in a spot of trouble, like, God, I need you. And
Yeah.
again, it's in the text. It really is in the text. If you actually read the Bible, it's like, bro, you're not one of mine.
And then a lot of people got to recognize the fact that people have intellectualized themselves out of morality. There's a
100%.
lot of prominent scientists that will say that morality is just an aid in reproduction, and any deeper meaning is illusory, meaning that there's no right, there's no wrong, there's no truth, there's no false. Charles Darwin wrote in his book that if we were just evolved apes, or we're the descendants of distant cousins of evolved apes, whatever it is, he says that how can we trust our reasoning? We have the reasoning of apes. Our minds weren't evolved to discern truth. Our minds are evolved to discern survival, and those two aren't the same things. And so he's questioned, can he even trust our minds if we have the minds akin or adjacent to apes? And so my point is saying this right here is that when you think about those kind of mindsets, do you want to live your life in that kind of way? So the Bible's meant to be reachable for the common person as well as the intellectual. And you see that at Harvard all the way down to your local community college or the homeless guy on the street.
Yeah.
Yep.
That is miraculous in and of itself. How many systems can herald that type of reach? Christians started as slaves. When you look at early Christianity, this wasn't like Islam where they had the rule of the sword. Christianity was slaves and merchants. It was illegal to be Christian for the first 300 some odd years. The common person was able to use it. Those of us who have ancestors in chattel slavery, their only hope was what they were reading in the text, because they didn't have no real hope outside of that.
And it also went against survivability, the survival instincts to be a Christian in those days where you was getting persecuted.
Absolutely right. We can continue.
Over time, the Bible says slavery is okay. Christians now say it's wrong. Well, some of them. The Bible says women should stay silent. Christians don't. The Bible condemns divorce. Christians ignore it. So tell me, if God's morals never change, why do Christians keep updating them? Christians today say slavery was a cultural thing. God didn't really approve of it. Women aren't lesser. Paul's words were for that time period. Divorce is complicated. God understands our circumstances. But hold up. Isn't God supposed to be the same yesterday, today, and forever? If God's moral laws are eternal and perfect, then they shouldn't need revision. Because let's be honest, if Christianity had been leading the charge on morality, we wouldn't have needed abolitionists to fight against biblical slavery. We wouldn't have needed women to fight for their rights to speak and lead, nor would we have needed secular societies to push human rights forward. Instead, every time secular morality advances, religion plays catch up until eventually Christians reinterpret their own scriptures to match what society has already figured out. And if morality is constantly evolving, then what does that say about a so-called unchanging God? Why are the most devout Christian nations not the most prosperous? If Christianity is the key to a better life, then why do secular nations consistently rank higher in education, healthcare, and quality of life? When we look at global rankings, the most secular countries, places like Sweden, Norway, Denmark, and Finland, are at the top in nearly every measure of well-being. Meanwhile, some of the most devoutly religious nations, places where faith completely dominates the culture and government, struggle with widespread poverty, high crime rates, political corruption, and low life expectancy. If Christianity truly had the transformative power that believers claim, if faith really was the foundation of peace, prosperity, and progress, then we should see the opposite trend, but we don't. Instead, we see something Christians aren't ready to admit. The less a society relies on religion, the more stable and prosperous it becomes. And before someone says, well, those countries used to be Christian, ask yourself, if Christianity is what made them successful, then why did they only start thriving after they became more secular? If you stop believing, would you still be a good person? If your only reason for being a good person is God, what does that actually say about you? Because if your consciousness disappears without God, then did you ever really have one? Or were you just following orders? Think about it. If a person only does the right thing because they fear punishment or hope for reward, is that morality or is that obedience? Because true morality isn't about checking a box for heaven or avoiding hellfire. It's about promoting human well-being and not causing harm, even when no one is watching. And the irony, some of the most religious peoples, the ones who claim their faith gives them superior morals, have done some of the most horrific things in history. Slavery, justified by scripture. Witch trials and burnings, carried out in God's name and justified by scripture. Colonization and genocide.
Yeah, I think one of the issues, again, with what he's saying right here is that the fact that you can point out people doing evil things in the name of religion does not make the Bible or God or anything of that stuff nature false. People can do horrendous things in the name of whatever it is. Whether it's secularism, there's been more deaths due to secularism than there has been due to religion. If you look at the historical account, a lot of the what the Soviet Union was doing, what a lot of Marxists did, there's millions and millions of bodies due to secularism. If you look at if you type in your phone right now and really do some research on the Crusades, you're talking about thousands of dead bodies, not millions. When you look at what Hitler did, that wasn't a religious movement. When you look at a lot of the Soviet Union did, that wasn't a religious movement. That was secular movements, and there was millions of bodies. So if you want to do who killed, who did more damage than who when it comes to secular versus religion, you're gonna be sorely mistaken. This guy in particular is gonna be sorely mistaken. But so I want to make the point that when he talks about the bad things that people have done in the name of religion, the abolitionists were not secularists or atheists. They were primarily Christians. When you look at the historical account, the abolitionists were Quakers, they were evangelicals, people that really believed that slaves were made in the image of God, the imago Dei of God, just like they were, so that it was incumbent upon them to make sure they weren't enslaved. That was one of the debates at the time, that the Native Americans, indigenous peoples, the slaves have a soul? Were they made in the image of God? If they were, we could not enslave them. That was the conversations. It wasn't secularism who freed the slaves. It was the understanding of Judeo-Christian doctrine. Slavery was everywhere.
Yep. I mean, if you look, Genghis Khan is one of the most prolific killers ever. He was he worshipped like the god Tengri or something like that. He was a Tengrist. We don't attribute his evil to that religion as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
It's just wild to think, and it's such a dilemma, like what Vulcan was saying is, and this is a tactic, right? This guy is only focusing on the negative things that have been done in the name of Christianity, and neglecting to talk about the positive things that have been done in the name of Christianity, right? We're talking about churches, charities, community outreach, blessings, miracles, all types of things that have been done in the name of Christianity. But because he has a focused vendetta against the belief, he would have you focus on the negative things. He's not being an objective thinker, and that's kind of what we as the Vulcan Soapbox want you guys to understand.
You know, how much longer we have in the video? Sorry, go ahead first.
I'm good.
We
A whole heat.
We have 4 minutes.
Oh,
4 minutes.
Let's go and
Chill.
All right.
Yeah, I'm over him.
Facts.
Blessed by the church and justified by scripture. Clergy, sex abuse scandals covered up by the very people preaching righteousness. So I'll ask again, if religion guarantees morality, then why does history tell a different story? Why does every religion have testimonies of changed lives? Christians love to say, I know God is real because he changed my life. But guess what? Muslims say the exact same thing. Hindus say the exact same thing. Mormons say the exact same thing. Hell, even Scientologists say the exact same thing. So which one is actually true? Because if every faith has people claiming personal transformation, then personal experience isn't proof of anything except that people are really, really good at convincing themselves of things. You see the problem? If everyone's experience is equally valid, then that means none of them actually prove anything. And here's where it gets even messier. People find God in every religion. People feel the Spirit in every faith. People hear from God in every belief system. So either God is really, really bad at making his identity clear, or people are just really, really good at attaching meaning to their emotions. And the funny thing, nobody ever has a life-changing experience and suddenly converts to a completely different faith that they weren't exposed to prior to. When people find God, it's always a God that they already had cultural access to. Because at the end of the day, religious transformation is less about divine truth and more about psychological reinforcement. And since you've made it to the end of this video, you've earned a bonus question because you're the real MVP. Why does God communicate through ancient texts instead of direct universal revelation? Imagine you're an all-powerful, all-knowing God. You created the entire universe.
Let's pause it real
quick. You love your creation. You want every single.
He's asking this question. I just want to make a point to what he was saying about religions changing lives, and if all different kind of religions, Islam, all these different religions say that they're changing lives, then basically saying it's not true because they're all different religions. But you got to understand that the conversation about God and religion is a cumulative thing. You see that with Dr. William Lane Craig brings up the best. There's deism or theism, which is believing in a God that has certain benefits. Then you can get more specific to what type of God it is that has certain benefits. And then there's getting to understanding the different doctrines and the way practitioners live in their life a certain way based off the doctrines that has certain benefits. Prayer has been studies. There's been studies that on prayer that have shown different benefits to prayer itself. People that there's been studies done about people that believe in God and pray to God, and the reduction in the deletion, the self-deletion rate, and their family ties and stuff like that. There's all kind of studies show that kind of thing. So yeah, Islam and Baha'i faith and different things can all report to have a change of life based off their belief in God, because belief in God in and of itself, before you get into the specifics of religion or denominations, has certain benefits to society. And so there's no contradiction there. He's just not looking at it closely and deeply enough. He's thinking, oh, you have to believe in Jesus, or you got to believe in Paul walked to Damascus to get this particular benefit that he's talking about. No, the belief in God itself, where you're not a nihilist, if you don't believe that all life is meaningless, there's benefits to that, to not believing that. David Hume talks about it when you study the great atheists of the past. They talk about the benefits. Friedrich Nietzsche talks about the benefits of some of this stuff. And some of them talk about it in more unfavorable terms, but they recognize that the death of God was a real thing, and that it was going to cause a lot of chaos in the world when you say that God doesn't exist. So there's benefits to theism and deism outside of a specific religion, and he is failing to notice that and to give that any type of thought. And that's he's doing a bad service to his listeners because of that. This is not contradictions in what he's the subject matter. This is a laziness and short-sightedness on his part.
I would say that it's purposeful, willing short-sighted. It's just a personal belief of mine. I don't think he's not trying hard enough. I think he's trying hard in the opposite direction. Somebody hurt him. Who hurt you, young man?
Single human being to know you, trust you, and follow you. So what's your strategy? Do you speak to every person directly in a way that they can clearly understand? Do you reveal yourself universally so there's no confusion about your existence? Or do you use ancient texts written in dead languages, copied by scribes who disagreed on doctrine, lost in the desert, found in the sea, edited by religious councils, and passed down for centuries with no way to verify accuracy or authorship? Really? This is the perfectly divine strategy to reach all of humanity. Because if so, it might be one of the most ineffective ways to communicate in human history. Think about it. If God wanted you to know him, he could reveal himself right now. Not through a book, not through a preacher, not through a social media commenter, not through a vision that conveniently only happens inside people's heads. He could speak to you right now, clearly, directly, no room for doubt. But instead, we get a book that has been translated, retranslated, misinterpreted, and politically edited for centuries. A book that is full of contradictions, metaphorical loopholes, and theological disagreements. A book that requires pastors, scholars, and apologists being under the right teaching just to explain what it even means. And somehow we're supposed to believe that this is the best God could do. Instead of clear, direct, universal revelation, he chooses a method that guarantees confusion, debate, and division. So tell me, if God really wanted to be known, why would he make himself so damn hard to find? All right, that's 10 questions, but if you're craving more content, we got you covered. Watch this next video, The Faith and Poverty Connection. It'll change the way you see religion forever. Also, check out this video by my friend Chris Mallard. And this video by my friend Ryan Koltastic, Yahweh's Anatomy Exposed. Click on one of these videos and let's continue to challenge outdated ideas. Until next time, keep rising.
So yeah, so I hope everybody benefited from that. We covered a lot of good material on that topic. Shout out to the brother for doing that video. I appreciate everybody who has a passion and they're actually doing their due diligence and putting a lot of work in behind the scenes to make it clear for everybody that they're on YouTube to be able to see what he's got going on and the benefit from his work he's been doing. But yeah, this is another example of somebody who is on the path of thinking critically, but hasn't arrived at a place yet where he can decipher the information in a way that's going to be meaningful for everybody and fair and unbiased. There's still a lot of cut in his product. We gotta recognize that.
All right.
Take it back to street term. I want to point this out real quick in his last thing. Go look up the definition of knowing. Right. The last thing he espoused was, if God really wanted us to know him, why doesn't he just make himself known? Humans know things through learning, which is an involved experience. Reading, listening, observing, engaging, gaining different experiences. That's how human beings learn. That's how human beings know things. What he's asking is, why doesn't God just show up and let you, I guess, let you see him? Which where else does that happen? I won't say I keep saying I don't understand, but I really do. I understand what he's doing. I'm just saying, pointing out that it's like very, very flawed in the things that he's saying and the questions that he's asking. And to be honest with you, I'm a bit annoyed. I ain't gonna lie to you.
Would you say it grinds your gears?
Scuffs my Timbs for real.
So next on the top, I know that y'all seen this for people that this has been trending. If you know about the ex-football player, I want to touch on this. Shannon Sharpe, he's being sued, well, accused of grape, and
Not
50
Uncle
million,
Shan. Not
$50 million civil lawsuit, man. Oof, man. Oh man, what's y'all thoughts? Did y'all hear about this, man? What's y'all thoughts on this? This is wild, man. $50 million lawsuit from his ex-girlfriend.
You talking about
For
old girl? He was on live with.
yes.
Interesting
Nah.
segue.
hmm
That's gonna be in the debrief.
Disney, you got some explaining to do.
You got some explaining to do. Talk about a drastic 180. Skirt.
Yeah, right. Definitely. Oh, I can hear myself now. Okay.
So yeah, I mean it's really early
It
right
began as
now.
a rocky consensual relationship.
Yeah,
Golly,
I mean
bro.
this is it's too early to be able to really tell what's going to happen with this situation because I'm sure you can't really say a whole lot if it's going to be an open case. But it's going to be interesting to see what's going to happen with this because we got a lady who's making these claims. I mean, I'm curious what kind of evidence she's gonna provide to support what she's got going on. At this point in time, we really don't know what's gonna happen right now. But that's America's uncle, so this is gonna be very shameful if this ends up being true.
Real quick, part of her complaint is that he recorded their sexual encounters without her consent. How long ago did his Facebook live, his IG live faux pas happen? Slip up.
I don't think it's been a year yet.
It ain't been a year, but it was a while back, right?
Yeah.
And when it happened, it went viral.
Yep.
So the chance that she wasn't aware that happened, which she could have sued then, but it's hard for me, man. I don't like to sound misogynistic and like I'm a victim blamer, but I'm like, man, the trend is crazy. The trend is so crazy.
Man, God, the ghostwriter writes, soon as there was a rumor of Shannon Sharpe potentially signing a $100 million contract for his podcast, all of a sudden, nigga gets sued for great.
Yeah.
Well, I will say this from what I've heard. I think Angela Yee, I heard her give a breakdown of it, and if what her information is true, she was saying that this lady, I guess they met in the gym. She's in her 20s, he's in his 50s, and he said that I'll pay for you to get your body done onto some level if you do this competition, you win this competition, whatever it was. And it started off as a consensual relationship, and she said that he was very rigid and very domineering and his demands with her at the time. But they moved together somewhere, so it wasn't like this is somebody who was being held against their will for the most part. They moved together in some kind of capacity. So it's gonna be really interesting because it seems like a consensual relationship, and you never really know what people do behind closed doors. I can say this in women's defense. You'll be surprised what your homeboys are capable of. And, I've heard stories of people that said they, guys that, act like they keep it playing and I'm like this and I ain't sweating these. And then you see, oh, wow, he was doing all that. That's crazy. They have documentation. You're like, wow. And honestly, women do the same things. So I'm not saying it's just one sided, but I can say this. When it comes to those intimate relationships, it's hard to make assumptions in a place where you don't know the information because it would surprise you what people are willing to do and what people feel at liberty to do in those relationships. It could be pretty sad and disgusting.
This is my only problem. I think the things that he's being accused of are wrong regardless. My whole thing is I want it to be wrong the whole time. I don't want it to be circumstantially wrong. I don't want grape to be okay until I'm not happy anymore. Right?
Yes.
And again, I'm not victim blaming. I'm saying if it's wrong the whole time, right? I don't want it to be like, well, he did this to me, but he bought me a Birkin, so it's acceptable now. It's not. It's not acceptable then, and it's not acceptable now. I want to know why, and this is the question I would ask: why, when it happened, it wasn't an immediate thing, right? And that's when I'm talking about circumstantial. You are, and the way that it is presented in social media or in the media in general is like, this is, this is just atrocious, this behavior. And I'm like, why wasn't it atrocious then when it happened? He did this to me 6 months ago, but he took you to Dubai. He spent a little bit of money on you, and you was like, that's cool. And again, this is not a victim blaming thing. I want people to understand, like, if it's wrong 6 months after y'all had that fight and you don't like him no more and you see your way out, it was wrong when it happened. That energy should be kept. And at the very least, the fact that it didn't get reported until too late. Like I work in corporate safety. If someone come in and say, listen, I injured myself 2 weeks ago doing this, we at the very least look at the legitimacy of that claim. Because if it was enough that you are now claiming like a work-related injury and saying that you can't work, why wasn't it like that when it happened? Why you ain't say nothing back then? Right.
Yeah.
And that's I'm just looking for, and here's the thing, this is the last thing I'm gonna say about it. I don't care for how society in general accepts the claim of it as truthfulness. So essentially, once they say it, Shannon Sharpe is automatically demonized. We don't know nothing, but as soon as you accuse somebody of that, they automatically have the shadow on them. And I'm like, we don't know the circumstances. We need to ask the hard questions. Hey, why you saying nothing back then? But it's seen as such a faux pas to even ask those questions, to even consider.
I'll say this: I've asked those questions to ladies when they've been through traumatic experiences, and one thing I've learned is that they can't even explain why they didn't really say it. Shame, guilt. They're not wanting people to to be exposed, whatever it is. I've learned that ladies really do at times hold on to things like that and don't share it. And there's no explanation for why they do it. I've seen it. I've had friends that have been through things and have shared it with me. Unexpected. I didn't expect them to even share it with me. And I just teared up, and I was wondering, like, why didn't you say anything? And they don't have a better explanation than
they do. They do. And again, the thing about it is, and I'm okay with being a villain. Similar to Vulcan, I've had these conversations, and anybody that knows me in person, they know that I'm not. They know that I'm very empathetic and sympathetic, especially to the women in my life. Like I don't play about them.
I can vouch for him on that. He don't play about stuff like that.
I also am known for holding folks accountable. Accountability is not a blame thing. Accountability is understanding how you arrived there, what your part in that was, and that means you're able to control the things that you're able to control. So I've spoken to victims on a regular basis. I say on a regular basis. I've spoken to enough individuals, and the way I communicate, I'm able to kind of get them to like dig deep, right? Even those that are a bit traumatized, the way I communicate is just like, hey, let's dig into it. And it really boils down to, often, not all the time, often it boils down to, I was in a situation where I should not have been. I was doing things or saying things or something, right, that they had control over. And then someone took advantage. To take advantage doesn't go away because the accountability portion of it. But to Vulcan's point, where you're saying they really can't explain it, I would bet money if you press them, right, to remember and go back into it. There's very few of them that wouldn't, at some critical juncture in that story, have done something that they will acknowledge, like, that was the wrong decision, or I probably shouldn't have been doing that, or I probably lent to this overall. That's not a victim blaming. That's accountability. That's saying if I had done A, B, and C.
The difficulty with that is just if you're trying to hold them accountable for putting themselves in a bad situation, you can do that successfully. If it gets to the point where somebody goes, "That's why that happened to you," that's when we run into trouble. Yeah, that's when you run into trouble.
Right, and I make that delineation. I don't indemnify steps D, E, and F by the other person.
Yeah.
because of A, B, and C. But half of the individual that the victim, I'll just say the victim, should have accountability for A, B, and C. That's all I'm saying.
To
And
protect themselves.
oftentimes they will agree with me. Like, you know what? I did A, B, and C. That doesn't make D, E, and F right.
Yeah.
All the energy that I have for the perpetrator is still what it is. I don't take nothing off of them. But it's not a one-sided thing. Very seldomly is it a one-sided thing. And that's what I want to point out. There is a level of control that the victim has that they do not utilize in their decision-making process that no one talks about.
I think for me, the difficulty that I found in these kind of conversations is when it gets to saying things like, okay, if we know they give the story and you realize, okay, cool, you've known about this for 3 years, why are you sharing it now as opposed to when it happened? There really is no infraction in sharing it 3 years as opposed to when it first
No.
happened. There's no infraction there, so there's no. All you can say is, I really wish you would have shared it earlier, because maybe other people could have been saved from that particular danger, or maybe we could have got some kind of street justice, which is not ideal either. But that's all best you can do. So. But I've never been through that kind of a traumatic experience to be able to understand it from a first-hand knowledge. Maybe the shame or the guilt. We're gonna get into the Kanye situation where he's just now. And how old is Kanye? In his 40s, mid to late 40s now.
Yeah,
Talking
late 40s.
about situations he had going on that he never exposed for 30, 40 years.
Right. My only thing is, can we not ask why? That's my only I won't say problem, but that's my only ask is, why can we not ask why?
Okay, what is the benefit in asking why? I guess with my question. What are we hoping to get out of that?
I will use an anecdotal thing. When I do a 5Y or a deep dive on a situation, even when it's a late report, I still need to understand what happened. I still need to understand certain things. Also, just in general, the further away from a trauma that you get, the more hazy those details become, the harder it becomes to prevent, right? If you say you got hurt doing A, B, and C, that story or that incident is much more fresh in your head, in your mind, in terms of preventability when it just happens than it will be 2 weeks from now when you've experienced other things. Your perspective has probably changed on things. You've got so now I'm looking at preventability overall. It's very difficult to prevent this, to your point. Now, again, this is not a victim blaming thing. I'm saying I'm espousing the benefits of asking why. I'm espousing the benefits of asking why, or getting the story immediately. When it happens, tell us. Not only can we prevent future infractions, we also have a better understanding of the whys that it happened, which are important, right? The further away from the incident that you get, the more hazy those details become, the more difficult it becomes to successfully prevent and predict those types of things.
Facts.
Well, we saw Shannon Sharpe Pretty Act says Shannon Sharpe said he won't even ride an elevator with a woman. I don't think he would put himself in this situation. I mean, he put himself on live during a sexual encounter. And also this young lady said that she was in a relationship with him for 2 years. So this statement or this quote may have been about, strange women or outside women, but this was supposedly his woman that's making these accusations.
Slightly different situation. If you're going to be in intimate relationships with people, you're risking this type of situation happening. There's no way to avoid it, really.
Especially in a society that takes folks for their word when they say these things.
Yeah.
So yeah.
What else is in the news? That's the Shannon Sharpe, and the lawyer that just followed the lawsuit is the same lawyer that follow also against Jay-Z, and he was accused of doing some.
Are you serious?
Yeah, same. Yeah. So
How is he still getting work?
he's doing his thing. All right.
Oh man.
All right. So, what else is in the news? And Vulcan mentioned this earlier. Kanye West just, he just released a song called "Cousins." I'm gonna go ahead and show you that too. I want to get your thoughts on that.
I'm gonna play a snippet of it.
Nah, he
said,
actually
"I'm
talked
playing no
about it
snippets
in
now."
a tweet. Because they was asking about the context.
Kanye says, "This song is called Cousins, about my cousin that's locked in jail for life for killing a pregnant lady a few years after I told him we wouldn't look at dirty magazines together anymore. Perhaps in my self-centered mess, I felt it was my fault that I showed him those dirty magazines when he was 6, and then we acted out what we saw. My dad had Playboy magazines, but the magazines I found in the top of my mom's closet were different. My name is Ye, and his name is Ye, and he sucked his cousin's penis until he was 14." Tweet sent.
Wow. Did y'all listen to? Did y'all hear the song or sing the lyrics?
I've heard a brief snippet of it.
Yeah, I've definitely heard the song.
So, what's your thoughts on that? Do y'all think he's? I'm seeing a few people online saying they think he's trolling. What's your thoughts on is Kanye trolling? With
Well,
these
it's hard to
tweets
know because he's essentially the often he's essentially the boy who cried wolf.
Hmm.
He's been guilty of trolling so many times, and this falls right in line with it. I'm not speaking to the truth of his statement or not. I'm not questioning it at all. I'm saying he often makes statements like this, inflammatory statements on social media when he is about to drop music to garner attention. Now that again, going back to our earlier content, doesn't have anything to do with whether or not it's true, right? So I'm not being guilty of a fallacy, just stating a fact that he often says inflammatory or makes inflammatory statements or tweets or posts when he's about to drop music. They bring him back into the public relevancy so that he gets he gets interest drummed up in what he has to say through his music. And I mean it's a common tactic, so it's not just a gay thing, it's not a Kanye thing.
And
But
I was
he
going
has
to
been
say
guilty of
too. I
this.
wanted to say this. My first initial thought was this is not common in our culture, black culture, particularly black men. And then I had to think. I'm like, wait a minute, no, there's Young Thugs wearing a dress. You have rappers saying things like this. But Daylight, you remember when he used to be on Vlad TV? He was saying a lot of things.
He said he would sleep with Diddy.
Yeah. So in the hip hop culture, you could say this
Fairly common.
This is common. Yeah.
Yep.
I don't think that makes it common. I mean, I think percentage wise, it's still very low percentage. I don't know if I would say it's common.
Okay.
Well, I mean, it's not in the hip hop community. It's in the entertainment industry.
Entertainment industry, yeah.
So I don't want to make it seem like it's just us that's doing it.
That's fair. That's fair.
But what percentage of rappers are saying these types of things have happened to them? Would you say what percentage?
Well, I do want to say this. The
a
difference
number
between
specifically.
what Kanye saying, he actually was doing these acts. So you can't say something happened to him. He was performing these acts until he was like 14. But
yeah, he's a kid, 6 to 14. Yes.
Yeah. So to your question, what percentage of rappers are actually being vocal about those things? It's still, I have to agree, it's a small percentage.
It definitely is a small percentage.
Like what? Like how small? What number would you guess?
If I had to guess, less than 6%, maybe 5%.
Oh yeah, I would say less than 1%. It might be Kanye and like one other
So,
rapper.
The reason why that's
we don't
important,
know,
because on the Vulcan Soapbox, I want the audience, the folks out there, to understand that when people are using words, it's important if we can to get them to quantify even their guesses, because these things matter. If somebody's going to say this is common or this is not common, what does that look like? I mean, definitely 6% or less wouldn't be considered common. And so I want to say that part, but I also want to say this, right? One thing that I would say about Kanye West from his very beginning was that he was more vulnerable and more open about what was going on in his life than the average rapper would be. He's the same one that said, well, we're all self-conscious. I'm just the first to admit it. I want the Jacob Wood 25,000. He was the one that was doing those he was always he was always being a little more transparent about his intentions, his motives, his vulnerabilities than the average rapper, than Ludacris would be, or that, in my generation, Ja Rule and DMX was going to be about things of that nature. That they were always going to make themselves look better. And you see Kanye West would be the one who would say things that could make him look more lame or make him look worse.
Yeah.
And so I would just say this is definitely even more vulnerable than he has been. But if you look at him lately, I think this is kind of in step with the direction we've been seeing him going. The only person I've seen that I can see that kind of been akin to him as far as vulnerability is like Mike Tyson. You listen a lot to Mike Tyson's conversations. It's been the last 5 to 10 years. He's been very vulnerable about his fears and about, some of the things he's done in the past with Teddy Atlas, talking about those things. And so you see certain people but that's very uncommon, especially within a Black context.
So I want to clarify the earlier statement. The tactic of drumming up drama before dropping content is what I was calling common in the entertainment industry. Not being vulnerable with things of such explicit or sexual or private nature like Kanye is. So I don't think that's definitely an anomaly. That's definitely anomalous behavior by Kanye within the context of the hip hop culture. But the entertainment tactic of drumming up drama right before you put something out to generate interest in you as an individual, so people want to go see your work or hear your work or consume your content is common. That's what I was talking about.
That's very true. I think when it comes to this kind of a thing, I think it does highlight a bigger issue. He talks about the dirty magazines and the graphic images that he was being exposed to. And I think a lot of people can relate to that. I know myself, I've been exposed to that stuff when I was very young, finding very graphic material that did change the trajectory of my more intimate or my intimate perspectives about life and things that I was exposed to. I know Kurt Franklin has a song called Shout, or I think it's called Let It Go, actually.
Let It Go.
And he talks about that. I actually listened to that song like 2 days ago, I think it was, and a very powerful song. I still appreciate it to this day. A lot of rappers and musicians have made songs about those kind of things and the effects that those type of graphic images have had on them. And so I think it could be a good thing that he brings this stuff up, and those of us that are able to hear it, we can use that in our daily lives with our own children, with our own family members, because he thought this. I think the numbers that are being thrown out is he was like 6 years old all up to he's 14 years old. That's an impressionable kid.
His cousin was 6, and he did that until he was 14. Just to be accurate. His cousin was 6, and he said he did that to his cousin until Ye was 14.
Yeah.
So we don't know the age gap between them or whatever that is. But so
we saw him defending his sexuality, talking about he wasn't gay or something like that, and I think this is gonna go against hip hop parlance and it's gonna be counterintuitive to what our hip hop intuitions would be in this situation, even Black cultural intuitions would be. But I can stand with him and say that just because he made that stuff at a young age doesn't necessarily mean that he was gay. Kids can sometimes mimic things that they're seeing for experimental reasons, and it's not an indication of him being,
I think gay,
being homosexual.
Gay on the spectrum. I think gay is a lifestyle.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, culturally, we call a lot of things gay, or a lot of acts or individual, like singular acts, gay. But in real world terms, that's a lifestyle. You're choosing to live your life that way before you can be called like gay. But colloquially, obviously, jokingly, or when we're busting our friends' chops, that we'll call it the overall pause culture it's much broader than what gay actually is.
Mhm.
I heard the song, and to me, it was a very touching song. You know, no pun intended. Just because of the stuff that he was talking about his cousin and stuff like that. And you know, I remember in that song, I think it was Family Business. It was talking about, you know, family being locked up for whatever reason, and his family business. And I wonder if that's what he's talking about, that particular cousin. That's what I thought about. You know, but the reality is that I'm taking that message that he communicated and trying to apply it to my life to be more vigilant about stuff like that. You know, to
Yeah.
make sure that, you know, people that I care about, especially the younger generation I care about, are not being um, misled and understanding what sexuality is and how it's meant to be utilized as a young person, as all the way to an adult. So yeah, I mean, I thought it was very brave of him to do so. Now it may not be bravery, maybe he's having some kind of mental breakdown or something like that. But I think I don't care whether or not it's true or not, or whether or not it's indicative of his mental breakdown or not. Really, I think that we can all use that as a lesson
Yeah.
to be more watchful of stuff like that, because
Mhm.
I know a lot of people that suffer with addictions related to graphic images and stuff like that, to more intimate graphic images. You know, they've already talked about how it rewires the brain. So this is telling for all of us, and I think in our community, because we're so sexualized, we needed a wake up call like this, whether or not it's legitimate or not. So that's how I'm
Yeah.
taking it.
I think even anecdotally, whether it's true or not, you can utilize this in your everyday lives. Like Vulcan
Absolutely.
was saying, um, if you just read into it, right? If you read past the Kanye of it all, if you will, uh, he's talking about the exposure that children have. And to be honest with you, this is more true today
Yeah.
than it
That's
ever
what I was
was
thinking.
before, because
Yeah. That
our
was the
children have
magazine.
access to our children have internet in their pocket, and
Hmm.
more of them, they're more like back in the day. You didn't have to be like, if it wasn't in your house or it wasn't around you, you just didn't have access to it,
Hmm.
right? And even if you did have access to it, you had access to it in a very limited amount. But
Absolutely.
a large percentage of kids, even kids Kanye's age, right, or Kanye's age when this happened, excuse me, have the internet in their pockets, and you can put, you know, whatever filters that you want on a parental filters, and those things are effective, but they're not effective to someone who's actively trying to subvert them, right? You can put your magazines up in the closet, but that doesn't mean nothing to somebody who's gonna go get a stool and stand on top of it.
Absolutely right.
So that's that's where kind of this is anecdotally important to everyone in the culture, to kind of be more cognitive, uh more
Yeah.
yeah, of what your child is exposed to.
Yeah, so just to echo what Freshly said, the Kanye of it all, I don't want that to be a red herring to distract people from the wake up call it is for our community and our society, with how we this widely disseminate these graphic images and don't tend to think that it's that important that we have discretion. So that goes from music videos to Reddit to, you know, YouTube and everything else. All the different images people are being constantly bombarded with, that can have very negative effects on the psychology of a lot of our youth and adults as well. So I think that if this is true, and even if it's not true, but especially if it's true, the amount of transparency and vulnerability that he displayed here, to me, is very admirable. And it wouldn't be a shock because of what I've seen from Kanye from the first time I got a encounter with, first time I encountered his music. He's always shown a little more vulnerability than the average rapper, maybe a lot more vulnerability than the average rapper. And most of it, I'm not the biggest fan of the ideas that he shares, and a lot of his movements that he's participated in, and concepts that he's engaged with. Is I find it pretty embarrassing for the most part. But I want the show to be a representative of being able to eat the meat, spit out the bones, to be able to throw out the bathwater without throwing out the baby. So, and I think that this is a prominent case right here of that same thing. Um, it's a little bit vulgar and graphic, his tweets and all that kind of stuff. Whatever platform that he used to be able to share this information, it's a little much for my palate. But I'm gonna look at the good in it, because this is something that for a long time we've needed to look at a little bit closer and improve in. So that's what I'm taking it for. That's all I got on the topic. That's all I got on the Kanye situation. It's a very somber situation for me because I can empath. I mean, as an empathic person, I'm definitely empathing a lot of what's being communicated there, and I hear the hurt, and it's very sobering in light of all the drunkenness of graphic images that I've been exposed to in our society, and I'm sure a lot of us have been exposed to.
Want to start off with closing statements? That's the last time.
I'll just say thanks for tuning into this Vulcan Soapbox, y'all. You know, feel free to like and subscribe and send in information, send in videos, request to be on the show. We enjoyed the conversation. We want to be as objective as we can and be as informative as we can. We want to have fun at the same time. Vulcan Soapbox, we're out.
I'm here to stay on my soapbox and proclaim that to the world.
On this show.
This is the hottest show on the planet right now.
What's the debate?
Ain't no debate.